Oh, she's on. I'd like to call to order the meeting of the Portsmouth School Board on Tuesday, January 25th, 2021.
Roll call. Welcome Margaret Honda, our SU 50 rep.
No.
Liz Barrett. Lisa Rappaport.
Here.
Ann Walker.
Here.
Margot Peabody.
Here.
Nancy Claiborne.
Here.
Hope Epps.
Here.
Ryan French.
Here.
Carrie Nolte.
Here.
Emily Grigsby.
Here.
Nick Thomas. Right here.
I ask that we all rise for the pledge of allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag
Of America, and to the which it stands one nation, under God, with liberty and justice for all.
Can we take a motion for acceptance of the January 11th and January 18th school board minutes? Move to approve. Second. Oh, any discussion? Let's have a roll call vote.
Lisa Rappaport.
Yes.
Ann Walker.
Yes.
Margot Peabody.
Yes.
Nancy Claiborne.
Yes.
Hope Epps.
Yes.
Ryan French.
Yes.
Carrie Nolte.
Yes.
Great. At this point, we'd like to open it to public comment, and I will remind you that we have 3 minutes to make our comments. And at the beginning of your comment, if you would state your name and your address, that would be great. I don't see anybody in our home physical space. Is there anybody in our Zoom audience?
If anyone in our Zoom audience would like to speak to the board, just raise your digital hand and we'll give you your time. Going once, going twice. So, I guess that's it.
Okay, great. We'll close public comment and move towards our special presentations for the evening. First, we have Courtney Richings of our CTE program.
Yes, sitting so folks can hear me. Oh, no. Well, thank you all for having me here and congratulations and welcome to our new school board members. So I am here just to share an update with what's happening in career and technical education. And I've brought some special guests with me today to share about our newest program. I try to put everything in my report just to make things as easy as possible for you folks to refer back to. I know how busy folks are, so you have linked kind of what's happening in CTE, and I'm very happy to report that a lot of things that have not been on the agenda and able to happen in person for the last year or so are returning to in-person activities for students. So that's been incredibly exciting. And I just gave you a continued our goals for career and technical education for this year, knowing that we have some new school board members that wouldn't have been present at the fall presentation. But I wanted to really start off with just filling folks in on where we are at with our health science technology program. It's been really exciting to see that application move forward and to be able to start the new program. We actually have in the audience today, Mr. Bruno, who is our health science technology teacher that has joined us at the high school this year, and then 2 of our students. And I don't think we could be happier, honestly, with how the program is off and running. We have just seen the students get so excited about all of the opportunities. We've applied for a state grant, and we've continued to build new partnerships with the community. So I didn't want to really steal a lot of their thunder, but I wanted to share that we have our Health Occupation Students of America Career and Technical Student Organization added in CTE, which makes another opportunity for students to get engaged in networking, leadership, and skills competitions. Mr. Bruno is the advisor for that CTSO, and those students have the opportunity to get out into some state activities, do some professional development, and then really practice their skills in the field and possibly earn some scholarship money and have the opportunity to go on to nationals through HOSA. So we're excited about that. We've met with partners like Families First, the New Hampshire Office of Professional Licensure, which actually does the Board of Nursing inspection so that we can work on setting up our licensed nursing program. We are working with EMTs from the Portsmouth Fire Department. Mr. Bruno is actually going to work on getting his EMT instructor certification over the summer so that next year, when year 2 of the program is implemented, the students that are in their capstone year have the option to either go an LNA pathway and get certified or an EMT pathway. And that was really where my plan for the program was for year 2. Mr. Bruno has brought with him a lot of enthusiasm, excitement, and new ideas. And with that, we have some new certification options that I actually will let these lovely young ladies just share a little update about their experience and how this year's been going. So we have Aaliyah and Jillian, if you want to step up and you can kind of share. You want me to grab another share for you? So you're closer to the. So if you want to introduce yourself and your grade level and your career pathway interest.
Yeah, so hi everyone, I'm Jillian Richmond. I'm a sophomore at Portsmouth High School, and this is my second year in the HST program. I was in Intro to Healthcare Careers last year, and I'm in HST 1 this year. So we've covered a lot of material this year, and it's only it's like the end of the first semester. We've gone through safety standards for the healthcare professionals and healthcare systems. We've also learned about how to properly take vitals, which is like a really important skill for early healthcare interests to know. And we've also learned about trauma assessments for patients. We've learned about infection control and how prevalent that is to our lives today, as you all know. We've also learned about the medical and legal information from a healthcare standpoint. And we've also even learned about like the ethical side and morals of healthcare professionals and healthcare centers. So some of our like main speakers that have been in that health science technology like weighing in the last couple months were Portsmouth Fire and Rescue came with their ambulance, and we got to use a lot of our prior information from the early part of the semester of learning vitals and infection control, learning bits about ECGs. And we got to use that information to relate it to the Portsmouth Fire, and they brought their ambulance and they even ran an ECG on one of us, and we got to learn all about how that's actually used in an ambulance setting, compare it to a hospital setting, and even compare it to a clinic setting. So that really helped us learn and like solidify our vitals knowledge. We were also able to talk with the volunteer coordinator at Portsmouth Regional Hospital, Amy Lester. And she gave us information about volunteering at the hospital and other like health centers around the state, and internship opportunities for us between junior year and senior year and throughout college. That was really awesome. And all of these like public speakers and information from our first semester will go on to help us complete our second semester, which is we're learning about anatomy. We're starting anatomy and physiology. We're going through every single one of the body systems this next semester. And we're taking a 3-credit college class on medical terminology, 2 days of the 5-day week that we're in class. So yeah, we've covered a ton already, and I'm super excited for what that's going to like come through with next semester. So Aaliyah.
My name's Aaliyah White. I am a junior at Portsmouth High School, and this is my first year in the HST program. A couple of the things that I really like in the program is that we get to make informational videos or how-to videos about different medical skills. I actually made like a lifting video on how to properly lift in City Hall with a couple of the police trainees, and so that was really fun to watch. We also did a couple of the hand washing videos. We did how to don and doff PPE, personal protective equipment, and I think that using different skills or different things to learn, or creating videos, or just being different in like a test setting, using different things is really important, especially in health science careers. So
Yeah. Our big highlight from this past semester was the Health Science Symposium that we held at the school. This was in November, and we actually had the Air National Guard and the Army National Guard come and teach us all about trauma transport. And they were able to bring one of their Black Hawk helicopters and land it in our soccer field. And we learned all about search and rescue and medical rescues using the Black Hawk helicopter, which was amazing. We had Wentworth Douglas nurses come and bring their simulation mannequins. We learned how to do proper CPR and rescue dress on their mannequins. And we also had Portsmouth Fire come with a Stop the Bleed class for us, which related to what we learned. We learned a lot about trauma assessments and patient care in the field in the first semester of this class, and we were able to use some of that information in the Stop the Bleed class and gain a lot of knowledge about just like on the site paramedic EMT duties. So that was really, really interesting. And the symposium is hopefully going to become an annual thing that will always have more and different classes. So it was really, really awesome. Yeah.
We also just wanted to give a big thanks to Ms. Richings and Mr. Bruno for letting us have this opportunity and creating the new HST program.
Yeah, and we'd like to open it up for any questions if anybody has them.
For Anne?
I have not really a question. I love your enthusiasm, both of you. I think it's awesome. I have been very excited about this whole program and I love your enthusiasm. You're learning so much, it's wonderful.
I want to just echo what Anne said. I like, it's just so near and dear to my heart because I was an EMT, went on to nursing school, now I'm a nursing professor at UNH, I'm a board member, and so it's just so lovely to hear all the things you guys are already doing. I think for like the certification is so great. I'm just curious kind of what future plans you guys have, what future plans you or options you've sort of explored, and kind of how you feel like the support is for that future part, like if it's college requirements or whatever that is.
Well, I have been looking at 2-year colleges for radiology, and through Mr. Bruno, he was helping to actually like narrow it down to a couple of colleges that I have been looking at for the past couple weeks. So other than that, he helps with pretty much getting ready for college. Like I had my college meeting the other day with Ms. Lind, and he really helped me prepare for that.
We've learned a lot of really good study techniques in this class, like just learning the basics of health science that we can hope to carry on throughout our college education. I want to be a pediatrician, so I've volunteered at Portsmouth Hospital for the last year. And with Mr. Bruno being able to bring in the volunteer coordinator and introduce us to some internship opportunities in the next couple of years, that's been really, really helpful. And I'm only a sophomore, so I'll start looking at colleges soon. But we've had a lot of talks about interviews and how to maintain like professional attitudes towards healthcare now, and hopefully bring those on with us.
I'll just say that's very clear in your presentation and your engagement tonight, and if this was an interview, you'd be hired. So, you know, I just, you guys have done an amazing job.
I just wanted to echo, I love your enthusiasm about the program, and I really appreciate you guys coming and sharing your own experiences about it. Just in what you've laid out of the experiences that you've received. I mean, whether you're going something for entry level into medical field or going beyond that, I mean, for your portfolio of what you're going to be able to put on your applications, you're already ahead of the game with this program from a lot of people. So, you know, kudos for you being able to see that and pick up these classes. I'm wondering how these classes integrate with your other classes. I know sometimes at the high school, sometimes you can't take a class because it interferes with another class. I'm just wondering, have you found that things are integrating pretty good for you, that you can continue on with the program?
So we do a lot of we watch a lot of these videos that really can help us with studying techniques and learning techniques. I've had the same studying techniques since kindergarten when I first went into school. And like watching these videos really helps me and I'm like able to learn a lot better and like it actually like stays in my memory. But now like I'm excited to go to school and I'm excited to learn because I remember all of it. But I think it integrates really well.
With the help of my guidance counselor, I have made sure that this 2-year program is every day for 4 quarters of the year, so it's a lot of time. But with a few online classes, not many, and my normal course level, I have been able to make my schedules fit this class, anatomy and physiology, biology, chemistry, all the other science like that I'd want to have in my schedule, even if I wasn't able to take this class. So it's worked out really well with the help of my guidance counselor. So.
Well, congratulations to you both for the full load, and I can't say enough to Courtney for having the foresight to bring this program to Portsmouth.
I want to thank everybody for supporting it so we can do this for these guys, because that's what it's all about, really.
It is, very
Yeah.
exciting.
Liz.
Yeah, thank you again for coming, and you guys are great public speakers, so you might have a career in that as well. But I guess I just wanted to follow up with the internships. Is there sort of any sort of set opportunities that are available that have been offered to you guys, or I guess what are you exploring for internship opportunities?
Dartmouth Hitchcock has an internship opportunity for incoming seniors, so I would take that next year. And that's been offered to us. People that want to apply this year have been offered help with the application process or letters of recommendation from the staff here. And we've also been encouraged to volunteer places. Aaliyah has a volunteer opportunity with a radiologist that she's been like reaching out to from this class, like getting interest from that. And like I said, I volunteer at Portsmouth Hospital. Part of the reason is because of this class and getting connections with the hospital staff.
Great, thank you. And then is there, with the radiology program or some of these other 2-year programs, is there, being that you're taking college credits, do you know if there's any opportunity to start early for radiology or any sort of in there? I don't know, maybe that's a teacher question.
I'm not sure if that's something that we can start early on, but I know that we do get 3 credits from the health terminology going into that, and we also get another 3 if we would do the EMT class.
Thank you.
Yes, Brian.
Yeah, I just was wondering what's the enrollment right now, and also what's kind of the ratio, boys, girls, kind of thing, how's that looking?
Yep, so I will be honest, we have 2 sections running of HST1 this year, and the numbers are definitely lower than we expected them to be with all the student enthusiasm. Part of that, I think, was the awareness of the community and our team that we were really struggling to staff the position. With the demand for people in the health science field, we had a candidate that we were ready to hire, and we battled for 3 weeks with the hospital that finally outbid us and lost that candidate. And we add to that the challenge of folks wanting to not necessarily be in schools during the COVID experience. It was really, really challenging, and we were just super lucky that Tom found the position when he found the position, honestly, because we hired 2 weeks before school. So that is not a position that we ever really want to be in with a new program. But health science and engineering are 2 of the, and I think we knew this in advance, hardest to hire for positions. So knowing the reputation of the program and the partnerships that we're building and the awareness Tom actually presented to the school counselors a week ago about the program and all the opportunities for the students, I think that we'll see much better enrollment next year. We have 3 sections of the Exploring Healthcare Careers running this year as well. So students, will have the opportunity to get an introduction there.
And what's the ratio?
There's 1 gentleman in the program. So, and it is not a nursing program. So that's an interesting thing about health science is there's a federal list for Perkins programs of non-traditional programs, and some are non-traditional for men, some are non-traditional for women. Health science is neutral because of the diversity of career pathways.
Well, actually, ladies, I would say I loved hearing from you. Super jealous. Wish I had that class in high school. I'm an anatomy and kids, total nerd. So I would have really thrived in that classroom, and your joy is super contagious. So I hope you spread that to your peers. Courtney, my question for you is, have you considered having the kids get certified in wilderness first aid? They talked a lot about doing the you know.
Oh, don't encourage Mr. Bruno.
Oh.
No, I'm just kidding.
Because I know if the outing club has a membership to the AOC,
Yes.
often they'll certify you for no cost, so it'd be a nice
Yeah.
community relationship between the outing club and.
Right. They
this
did
program.
just host a weekend training through our outing club at the school to get folks wilderness first aid trained, so that was already set up.
Okay.
When these ladies finish, I was gonna run you through, but I'll fill you in. We did apply for, and I think I told you in the fall, a state grant. We're awarded that grant just before Christmas. So we have $3,600, I believe, from our friends at Portsmouth Regional Hospital for textbooks and print materials for the teacher, and then another $37,000 for equipment and supplies to expand what we're doing in-house with the program. So with all of Mr. Bruno's enthusiasm and great ideas, we're not stopping at just EMT and LNA. And while we want to focus on that for next year to get those programs off and running and really solid, the grant brings in so many other opportunities for students to get certified as train the trainer models. And they would do CPR, first aid, AED. Mr. Bruno is very passionate and has experience in wildlife search and rescue and worked in the national parks in that venue. So that's something he's interested in bringing in. Also doing things like EKG certification, phlebotomy. So we have 3 departments at the hospital that we've been working with about setting up opportunities for the students to go in there and observe. The phlebotomy certification is another opportunity that's on the table, but at the same time, we have to roll out year 2 with quality. We did also create an articulation agreement with Southern Maine Community College, and so with that, I think we have 9 articulated credits, different than dual enrollment, but if the students choose to go to that school, then they can, you know, get their transcript to the school and be considered to add those courses, their transcripts, without having to actually take them up at the school. So it's been nonstop, and I don't think that there's a week we don't have a new partner reach out. Tom will let me know later that I have left off one of our new partners that have reached out this week. And I can't, you want to fill me in on the name of Portsmouth Spine and
Sport.
Important spot.
Therapy.
they're the most recent conversation. So, and all of these, we're trying to set up internship opportunities. And at the same time, Ms. Bellavona is working to create diverse internship opportunities. So if students don't necessarily want to stay directly in human medicine, but want to do dental or vet tech, but choose to do the hands-on learning through this venue, they'll be able to do internships in that field and just get a leg up on the competition when they go to post-secondary.
I just have a follow-up on, you said there was a wilderness program that was just short, not the one that you could bring on to CTE, but the you just did.
It was a wilderness first aid CPR training over a weekend that the outing club offered.
Oh, okay. So how is the word getting out on these programs?
That was in the announcements, in the newsletter. I think Google Classroom for the outing club, on the physical announcements at school. I don't know if I'm missing anything, but so then that's our.
all over the wall.
Yeah, that's right, flyers all over the building, but yep.
Great, Carrie, you have one last question?
Yeah, and I totally, I get the interest in trauma and skills, like our nursing students come in, they want to do shots and things like that. The one piece I haven't heard about is mental health and whether the health professions program has students interested in that as well. And if there's other opportunities like mental health first aid, things like that.
We definitely do, and we kind of share the psychology counseling piece with careers in education, which also has a component of like behavioral sciences. So a lot of the students that are interested in counseling tend to go to Ms. Carla's careers in education program as well. There's a lot of interest as far as student interest in
Yeah.
those
Psychology.
social work, psychology.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
and I'm just, there's like a very new and a lot of the state funding has funded organizations to do more outreach and care coordination, which is very much like, there's not a degree or certification required, but just that human service interest and things like that. So I think as things change and funding changes and stuff like that, there's just so many opportunities. So you guys are all in great shape to make a lot of great choices, and we have a shortage in all of them. So thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bruno.
Great job, ladies.
Anybody
Great
else
job.
have a question? Lee, did you have any more things you wanted to present?
I have
Yeah.
more
Yeah.
CTE.
That's what I thought.
Yeah, okay.
Just making sure.
Absolutely. I can free you lovely ladies if you'd like to.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Great job, ladies. Thank you. So it's been very, very exciting. We put in all of the orders for the health science grants last week, and that's processing. So we're really excited. Ms. Lyons and I are going to meet with folks from the board at Portsmouth Regional Hospital on Friday afternoon and just kind of solidify some of our partnerships. We have all of the CTE centers in the state kind of reached out to and are sharing all of their MOUs, MOAs to help support us and just moving along all of those partnership agreements and borrowing, language to make us work smarter and not harder to move the program along. And, it really is all about increasing opportunities for students. So on that note, we're looking, it seems small compared to the last couple of years, but just to 2 additional dual enrollment opportunities for next year. And our hope is that entrepreneurship, which is the last piece in the business program that is not aligned with a running start opportunity, we'll have then all 5 courses in those career pathways, all accounting 1, marketing and intro to business are running start already. So entrepreneurship would be that last piece. We're also working with Great Bay Community College to see if we can add additional community college courses in New Hampshire, given that Southern Maine Community College quickly found us 3 courses that we could align with for articulation. We're hoping to increase that as well. And then I did want to follow up on the CTE portfolios. I included in the presentation an invitation to the school board for our CTE award ceremony. Just, I know how busy folks are, so you get that on your calendar. Teachers in level 1 CTE programs are working on developing portfolios for every program to have students build a body of work that shows what they know and are able to do and how their growth progresses over time, which is, the way that we really do prefer to assess their growth and development. So we have one program that's working on papers. Some programs are working in Google Drive. Some programs are building websites. It really depends on the feature of the program. And I'm happy to say we have business students and the health science students that are actually building video portfolio, which gives you a real sense of, from a marketing perspective, how they build rapport with a client, what kind of, sales techniques they're able to embed, and then they get client feedback on their sales procedures. Kids have been very busy with their skills videos. So they're going to take many different formats, but what we hope is to be able to celebrate student learning at the CTE Awards ceremony and then transition into our Completers Awards and National Technical Honor Society. Assuming we'll be in person in the gymnasium this year, and we would love to have you all there to see what the students are doing. And I can talk about it till I'm blue in the face, but to see them and hear from them is definitely the best piece of it. So I have summarized for you folks just a lot of what's going on that's good in CTE, and just happy to report that, it's been a trying couple of years and everybody's doing well. And this community, I will continue to say, is just amazing. We have folks reach out wanting to partner with all of our programs on an ongoing basis. So it really is fun to kind of keep up with that. Mr. Jones just finished that project for the city. I shared a picture that you can click on and take a peek at his project layout. In architecture, Mr. Lilly has, I think 4 presidents of automotive dealerships coming in next week. And the partnership with the Exeter Automotive Group has just been amazing. He's got a fairly new Volvo car, about $7,000 worth of Volvo specific tools, and 12 engines that were drop shipped to the school because they were abhorred to find out that we had donated engines and the kids couldn't have 16 of the same engines for them to work on. So they culled everything from their East Coast factories and just shipped them all up to the students. So it's really been an amazing opportunity for folks to kind of just reach out and say, how can we support the kids to learn more faster, and how can we help prepare the pipeline to support industries that are really, really hurting for employment. And it's just been a lot of fun to develop those relationships. It'll be great to speak to those folks and find out, you know, how we can support one another. I think Mr. Lilly has 6 students that are actually working in dealerships as high school students, which a couple of years ago, even from an insurance perspective, was unheard of, because students under the age of 18, you know, weren't given those opportunities. But these kids have really buckled down and are earning so many certification opportunities, whether it's their SP2 or their Valvoline certifications or their automotive service excellence. It's just giving them a leg up on the competition, and they're able to fill some niches that are really high need. So on that note, we have our comprehensive needs assessment to the state due spring. The format has changed, so we have a survey that's been going out. If you haven't had a chance to participate, please do. I'm going to be putting it out through our social media. But we have already, I think, more than double the community feedback on that survey that we received last time it was sent out. It's great feedback. We're sending it out to all stakeholders. Love to hear from students, alumni, industry. If you also have increased ways to get the word out there, I'm happy to share the link with you. Everybody in the community is doing a great job of trying to get the word out there. And then I'll be collecting labor market information and talking to our post-secondary partners, and happy to share that report with folks. It's not due to the state the end of May, but we'll definitely be working along. And I received the great news last week that Pip Clues is joining us on the Business Education Committee. So our next meeting is on March 16th, and I look forward to having you there. We do have our former board member staying on as a community member and a parent too, so it'll be great to still have her perspective there. I don't feel like we have a lot of challenges in CTE world. I think business is booming and things are going really, really well. The one challenge I mentioned is just that hiring in education has been a really tough thing for us. And I think it's universal everywhere. It's not unique to us. I think Portsmouth is doing pretty darn well compared to other places. So I do hope to see that study committee at the legislative level in New Hampshire come to fruition, and we get some forward movement and some support from that level on recruitment and retention. It's been a long time coming, so that's pretty exciting. And then as far as I go, I don't have major budget implications. I'm sure you're right in the midst of it. You've seen it all, and doing a lot to try to support health science, and then stay on top of kind of aging equipment, and trying to be frugal in replacing and, you know, repairing what we can. We do have a lot of expensive equipment, and utilizing our community network as well to continue to support that, as well as grant writing. 2 of the teachers in the CTE world just applied for Clipper Foundation grants for new initiatives that they want to move forward with, and hopefully they'll both get supported moving forward.
Oh, I would love to get that link if you could email it to me.
For the
Love to print it
comprehensive
out.
needs assessment survey,
I
absolutely.
would love to print it out too.
Thank you.
I see it in, I think it's here, but I'm not sure if it's the actual link or not, so I'd love to put that out to my network.
Sure, excellent, yes. I'm gonna ask Chamber and Rotary 1 and 2, the breakfast and the lunch bunch, to please send it out for us as well, hoping that it would be great to have, you know, 300 or 400 folks. And the feedback I've seen so far is really fantastic.
I'm so mindful that this question is coming during COVID, when you've already expanded a program, all of that. I'm just curious in that a little bit on if there's been talk about adult ed or community ed within CTE. I've heard that was a thing that used to happen. I know that would take a lot of resources on top of what you're doing. I'm just curious where that's been.
There hasn't been a lot of ask for that. There have been a couple of things that have been brought up. Mr. Schaefer, our welding instructor, was asked to take the opportunity to use his space, and he ran night courses for the first 2019, 2020, and even 2021 for Great Bay Community College, so that members of the community had additional access to welding training. We've had some requests from folks about doing things like ServSafe certification, but when we went to the COVID remote, so much of that additional training went online that there hasn't been a lot of demand because there have been so many online venues that popped up. But yes, we are, I mean, I love to collaborate, so I'm always open to ideas for folks, and certainly I know having more utilization of, you know, city buildings, more of a 20 second shift model just makes it more fiscally feasible.
I really want to take automotive, so if we can figure that out.
I've been trying to get welding for myself, so, okay.
It's a personal bias, but no, thank you for that. That helps us first. And also understanding the components of how COVID has moved so much online and that there's different resources.
Liz.
Thank you again for this. I guess I was curious because I sort of was exposed to the EMT program through the Dover and Newmarket sort of collaborating, and you know, attorney friend said that his daughter became a licensed EMT at school and then went on to medical school. And so I thought that was great. And so is the opportunity there to license students as EMTs? I guess it's not clear to me like what the opportunities are for licensing, you know, and you know, how do we compare to other schools? Is that opportunity there and we can sort of progress to that in the future?
So the plan is for next year, LNA and EMT. So Mr. Bruno has planned to go back to school in the summertime so that he's certified to be an EMT instructor. So that will be one of the capstone offerings of the program.
Okay, great.
And there's a lot of kind of marketability too, and because of the shortage of nurses and things like that and medical assistants, some crossover and abbreviated training programs that have been put in place locally so that it will give students actually a leg up on hiring and progression to becoming medical assistants or LNAs in a much shorter term than they normally would. So all discussions in progress with our partners, but EMC and LNA are the primary end of program goals with 15 other things that Mr. Bruno has us working on, which is really exciting.
I know that Nancy has a question.
Is there any plan to have plumbing or electrical programs for that?
So the decisions around what we offer for programs and how we get programs approved not only looks at what our labor market needs are, which construction trades certainly is an absolute need, but we also look at all of the student interest surveys and the information that comes from the community and the comprehensive needs assessment. And we certainly across the board in all trades, people have interest, but students do not show an interest through their surveys in actually pursuing those trades. Similar to what happened when the program was sunsetted in the past that was construction trades, the enrollment numbers went down. And if we say we need this because we need plumbers and HVAC people to come into our houses and electricians to come into our houses, so we need those programs, we have to have a support system of folks who are willing to say that's a solid career pathway for my student too, and I'm going to encourage them to take that. And that is where the rubber is not meeting the road right now.
Thank you.
Very important.
Anybody else that we haven't heard from yet? Brian.
You were talking about the entrepreneur program. I think I missed part of it. What is it coming or?
So entrepreneurship is one of the capstone courses in the two pathways within business. So one is accounting, where they take intro to business, marketing and sales, and then accounting 1 and accounting 2. And then the other option is they do the intro, marketing, accounting 1, and then entrepreneurship. So that runs second semester of every year, and that's where we have the Paul Holloway competition, where the kids, for our model of a Paul Holloway competition, the kids come up with business plans. They do a meet and greet with members of Rotary, members of the chamber, and they're matched up with business mentors who then help them with specific components of their plans that need more development, whether it's finance, legal, real estate. And they get that advice from folks over the semester, and then they turn in all of their business plan presentations to a panel of industry folks who judge them. And then typically the top 5 students been Zoom for the last 2 years to compete in a competition for money that they're able to take with them to either support books or their startup venture if they want to take that forward. It's exciting.
Last two questions, so Carrie.
My question's for you, actually, but, so as far as the budget workshop piece, would questions regarding budget be now, or are?
If it's specific to CTA,
Okay.
while we have Courtney here, I think that's a great.
Okay, sure, I mean, your budget is very much the same from before, I'm sure there's just some stabilization and recovery, but where do you see other like investments, or what would you want to add, if you had opportunity?
Well, we did have increases in supply lines for some of the programs because costs relative to supply chain issues and just expenses of some of our, consumables during COVID have really increased. But the equipment and the lifespan of the equipment and changing out equipment, like I'm holding out and patching and repairing to try to make sure that we can make it to that. Hope the legislature still has renovation funds in the queue the way that they would in 2028. Because running something like the culinary arts program, which is fantastic, and the kitchen's back open, and the community wants everybody to be able to be part of Gourmet to Go, but that, I could roughly guess that that's a $150,000, kitchen. It is 20 years old, and so, it's limping along there, and, there are pieces of equipment in automotive, pieces of equipment in welding that certainly could see upgrades or modernization. There certainly are interest in new programs. So, a couple of things that we've talked about. I would love to see us have something from a perspective of agriculture and environmental science, and it's a crossover between Ms. Kim and the science world, and maybe it's not necessarily a CTE teacher, but we're working more collaboratively with those departments and not adding, teacher budget lines, but having something that's more hands-on and project-based. And then there's interest from the community as well as Peace Tradeport, conversations about the aerospace science and aerospace engineering. So those are conversations for the future. And if we were to go, which again, I would love to see if we thought student demand would support it in the way of something in the trades that were broader. There's a new set code that the state approved called Construction Trades General. And instead of it just being like carpentry and building trades, it's a little bit of masonry, a little bit of HVAC, a little bit of electrical, a little bit of plumbing, so that students can get their hands on all of those trades and decide, all right, I want to take this and turn it into an apprenticeship. But it's not just, building. So those are the 3 potential areas I think for growth and development right now.
Just a follow-up, yeah. The repair and replacement, like, numbers look pretty low. Have you been in a position where you're getting caught unable to replace, or that things are running out of service for longer than you like?
I think that we're able to manage with what we've had. We've had some things that we were able to juggle. We shut the kitchen down for a year during COVID. So, we've had major overhauls this year, trying to get things back on budget. And honestly, we've tried to use alternative funding streams like grant writing to support some of those things to not, have that burden fall back on the city.
Any other questions for Courtney? Liz, last question.
I guess, wanted to follow up too. I guess I'm wondering, you mentioned the construction trades general. I guess I'm wondering if, I think kids, obviously they want to reach big, right? So I wonder if we, is there a certain sort of initiatives to sort of talk construction management or talk, becoming a doctor, but if becoming a doctor, if you become an EMT, then it kind of gives you a leg up on the resume, or if you want to do construction management, if you know plumbing and electric, that gives you a leg up on your resume. Is there any sort of way that we, is there a way that we as a board can help sort of pitch that to parents or anything?
I definitely think so. I think marketing and CTE, because we're not a regional CTE center, wasn't necessarily an initiative. And we have the New Hampshire Charitable Foundation for Your Pathways grant we're in year 2 of. I actually was super excited today. I haven't even looked at it yet because I haven't had time, but we have the first draft of a career technical education lookbook that was created out of our partnership with the Chamber of Commerce and that charitable foundation grant. So we've been hoping that someday the masks would go away and we'd be able to take like back to normal photos for a lookbook. It wasn't happening, so we finally had a photographer come in this year to do a professional photo shoot, and then Ben and Nate at the chamber, we shared models of different lookbooks from the bigger regional centers, and they put together a draft that I just received today, and we're gonna meet and go over that first draft. So we have that step, and then we have our social media getting in order, and then we're looking at, we need to overhaul our website, for sure. And that's an area, I think, resource-wise, we can't use any federal money for marketing CTE, but marketing CTE, I know we're always talking about communication, that is an area definitely that we wanna focus on. So down the road, we talked about creating tech talks because the kids are so interested in TikToks. So if we had the resources and the editing function and the capability to do those really strong 90-second, 2-minute ad for every program and then tie it into career pathways. That's from an equity perspective, honestly, and a student opportunity perspective, the reason for all the run and all the career pathways is look at those benefits you can get. And the final for the kids in Exploring Healthcare this quarter was Malachi from the hospital coming in and Sean from the fire department coming in, and counselors coming in. And the kids were dressed to the nines in their interview attire, their resume and cover letter, and they sat down and each professional from industry would interview 4 of the students, and they had to market themselves as healthcare professionals. And the feedback was like, these are freshmen and sophomores, they do better than some of our medical candidates. And so like all of that gets them into the place where then they have the opportunity to get the benefits of not having those student loans and getting, you know, their post-secondary paid for. And that's lowering that burden on families is huge.
Any other questions? Courtney, it's always so great to have you. I think the kids in our district are so lucky for all of these opportunities, and it's just amazing to watch. Your vision is so clear, and you're so methodical about how you're always driving towards that vision, and creativity and securing grants to relieve the burden on some of the funding. It's just remarkable. We're really fortunate. So thank you for sharing.
Thank you guys. And we're having a blast here. Just want to do good things for kids and build good teams of people. So
Yeah.
thank you.
Yep. Thank you. Okay. Next up is Mary Lyons from Portsmouth High School.
Hello, everybody. Welcome. First, I wanted to say congratulations and welcome to the board members. And thank you all for all the time and effort supporting the schools. I sent my bullet point report to you. It's always my pleasure to come and speak about the successes of the high school, but also having the important to have that opportunity to explore further ways for growth. So I started with some successes. As I mentioned in my written report, the guidance department is working in partnership with Seacoast Mental Health to offer a monthly webinar series to support students and families. On the 18th of January, it was Mental Health 101, just to give you an idea of the categories. Everything a guardian wants to know and ask. And then in February, the topic will be teen dating and relationships. And I mentioned it also in the area of growth because it's been a little bit of a challenge for communication purposes to get it out there, to have people know the attendance at the webinars has not been that great. So, and they really do a wonderful, I've attended both the 3 months of the sessions, and they really do a beautiful job. So we've been working on reaching a bigger audience and getting the attendance back, so that it's more, the word is out there more. We have, done the whole newsletter announcements in Parent Square. The guidance department has been putting it out there with their newsletter as well. And but we have this month, It's a live panel. They've just started to record the session so that you can watch it if you couldn't make it at the, I think it's the third Tuesday of the month. But if people couldn't make the session, that they can see it recorded. But this month it's a panel, and it's the interactive nature, because they allow, it's about 20-25 minutes of a topic with the presentation, and then there's always time for like questions and answers. This one is actually a panel, so the guidance counselors have reached out to the Portsmouth Herald. We're hoping to get an article in there, get the word out that way as well. So the besides actually working with the Seacoast Mental Health in their partnership with the webinars, they've also our guidance counselors and career and college counselor and our college counselor have all been using the Flex Block with students to meet, whether it's in small group in or even class meetings sometimes, or just to talk about not the mental health, obviously in smaller groups, which I'll talk about in a few minutes with our outreach counselor, but they take advantage of this group for group time and individual time to really work with students. And we had I don't know if Courtney mentioned this or not, but there was the 24 different trade occupations from the apprenticeship program that the Portsmouth Naval Shipyard came and spoke, did those, Nicole does a great job of getting people in there just to sort of show possibilities, as does our college counselor with, college opportunities. And then of course, the individual conferences and different things the guidance counselors have been doing during the Flex. So we do, obviously, as a success, I guess I would say, have amazing students. They are really active, obviously, academically do very well, socially and civically. I mentioned in my successes that we had 7 national merit semifinals this year, and 1 who qualified as a national merit special scholarship contestant. We also had approximately, we'll know more when it gets closer to June, 175 students who will be eligible to be recognized as New Hampshire scholars in June. And the New Hampshire Scholars has you look at our program of studies, but it's really an advanced program of studies that the students commit to. And then we also have obviously tremendous participation from our students in clubs and activities, and they do well. And I've got to put a shout out because we just won the Granite State Challenge Championship. I did get approved. It was okay, Nick, for me to say that, I will say. They over the weekend, which was awesome to watch. Portsmouth defeated the 2-time defending champion Merrimack, which was really nice. Besides our own Nick, who was on the team. Yeah. This trophy. It's huge. And there's a wonderful banner. We put the banner up already. I don't know if you know that, the old foyer. And the trophy is huge. So we're very, very proud of them. They did a great job. It's really intense to watch. It airs in February, starting in February anyway. But I did get the okay to leave the story. Besides Nick, we had Francis Powell, Rio Marcus, Josie Saddam, and Pavlesco on the team. They did a great job. Our debate club also continues to win. We had the school tournament, a debate tournament, which is kind of a unique event where it was in the school. 40 students competed. It was judged by parents and by teachers and administrators and other staff. And I think we have a school board member. I don't know. Yes, okay. And against 2 other schools in the in-school debate, Portsmouth achieved the top 3 spots in the team category, and then also with the individual speakers. We also swept the Oyster River tournament, which was in December. We had a Maui UN, which is a great event in November, where students went 19 from the high school. They debated and discussed issues from world hunger and poverty and the Zhang dynasty and But anyway, those students also, we had students who received, Sam Bourne received honorable delegate, and Molly McKinnon and Rio Marcus, the verbal award. So they have lots of fun in these activities, but they also do a tremendous job, especially when there's competition. Our kids love to compete. We also had a wonderful showing of support for our community. Because as I said, our kids do love to give back. All the volunteering that they do, whether it's for NHS or peer leadership or Interact Club. But in the December, at Christmas time, of course, our student council runs the events that support the Clipper Family Fund. And they raised $15,000, close to $15,000 this year for the Clipper Fund, and supported over 65 families just in December. So that was awesome. I also mentioned as a success, to put COVID in the category of success is sort of weird. But I decided to just mention, because it does seem that we have to be responsive, and it's been working rather well. I think we had a huge spike right after the holidays in the numbers. We took that, and besides the fact that athletics had the restrictions and bans that started over break, it was lifted last week, which is good. But we also took our schedule and we modified it for the 2 lunches for a couple of weeks. Tomorrow we go back to, which I'm happy to say, 1 lunch. And our nurses, I have to say, have just been amazing, because when those spikes happen or things happen and people get nervous, there's many emails and phone calls and things, and they were working really round the clock to be responsive to that. So I felt it was, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention it, but when I think about being successful, we can't control the numbers, needless to say. I'd love to say, oh, that was a success, but they have gone down, and it seems to me that with the flexibility of the teachers, the dedication of the staff, and then the willingness of the students. We like the 1 lunch, the 2 lunches, but I do think people spread out, and it was helpful. And we also had, with absences, needless to say, teachers who are really giving it all. Well, they're one of the better things about what happened out of COVID, even last year, was the development of the playlists and having the curriculum accessible, even if you're not there. Of course, students will miss some instruction, but they have, even if you're out for days, they have access to the curriculum. And then we've had teachers who work, whether it's in flex block or during planning times or whatever, really just to make sure that they connected with kids. So I think that the handling of that has really been, it's been challenging, but it's been a success. Under challenges and opportunities for improvement, I mentioned. So obviously with news traveling so fast and so much conflicting information from so many directions, it can be challenging to just get out in front of it. And so as an administrative team, we are focused on providing prompt and accurate information to parents and staff and students. And following the incident a couple of weeks ago, we did send our safety protocols to families. I also met with the policy committee, and as an administrative team, we have discussed and developed the development of protocols consistent with the school board policy that I think is coming back to the table. I don't know if it's tonight. Yeah. So in terms of work related to school board goals, I mentioned briefly that we had our outreach counselor meeting with students. She has done a couple anxiety groups, a senior and junior cohort, and then a freshman and sophomore cohort. And she sometimes matches a group and then sets them up, or if it works, like they're good for a group, but she's also obviously met with individual students too. If families are interested, you know, she has done a lot of outreach, but if families are interested, just saying, especially if it's televised, or I'm letting you know as a board to definitely reach out. A lot of the referrals and things come through guidance counselors. or just word of mouth. So, so if there is a particular concern, she does run those groups and they've been very, very helpful. The board mentioned, I think somebody suggested the last go around something like a take a breath weekend, and that kind of thing, and we went back to staff. What we did get a sense is that there needs to be plenty of lead time into that, just because, you know, looking at just how things are set up with their unit plannings and so on and so forth, that they needed a little lead time. So it was interesting because I think it was right before Thanksgiving, and people were like, well, first of all, there's a cohort of people, we don't do any homework on weekends. And then people were like, yes, get the message out there over Thanksgiving break, you know, just to have that little break. And then going forward, which is what I wanted to mention tonight, is to look at it every term that we are going to be thinking ahead. So, so we have that, whether or not we call it a break weekend or what, but it is, you know, we are looking to do something again next quarter. We still continue to develop our master plan based on what the students have selected for their courses. And we have now, obviously, this is the time for next year's course selection to be underway. The guidance counselors went into the English classes in the month of December. And we just also have really tried to work on expanding those opportunities for personalized learning pathways. I know they're doing just amazing work in CTE on the dual enrollment courses, and we are also in the core classes instituting dual enrollment classes and adding them to the curriculum, which is nice. And I mentioned, I think the last time, we have AP in there, and some we're offering both, and we'll go with the, you know, depending if it's like a comparable class, whichever one is populated more, the demand is there. And also as I think we've talked about before, the eliminating of lower level classes, and I just wanted to mention again, our current, because when we go into course selection, our current freshman class, you know, they came in with the basically the two levels. You got the honors level and then sort of everything else. And then when they go to sophomore year, that will continue. So it's like a progression over the 4 years. So we're, you know, on the road, the expectations in the lower level classes, the level 2 classes in particular were, the concern was that the expectations were lower. The thought process is, first of all, giving a little bit more flexibility in the schedule in general, but also just to raise that bar. A lot of times, I wouldn't say trapped, but a lot of times if you get into a level, an applied level class, there's only one section of it. It would be the same for, so say it was an applied level class for math, there's only one section, then your schedule sort of dictated, you could be an applied level class with the same exact kids for, you know, your core subjects. So, so really just trying to look at opening the opportunities, raising the bar for kids, and that, it worked well so far with the freshman class, and they're moving on to the sophomore year. We had our PLC goal for administrators, district-wide, I don't know, maybe Steve talked about this before, but in the high school, it's for personalized pathways. And we're looking at ways to identify and measure them and find out what works specifically at the high school, and seeing if we can implement what is working, like in some of the opportunities, like I think of service learning that came up. The service learning class is very well liked. It's to be out there in the community, those kinds of things. It's like, you know, you see it as a, you know, they're picking where they're going, the students, and there's a lot of engagement and enthusiasm in there. So we're looking at, okay, so in that class, what's sort of like working in it that could also be incorporated in, you know, typical classrooms. So, so I just wanted to mention that, that when you talk about personal pathways in your goals, that it's one of the things that we're doing is as far as an admin PLC goal targets specifically to that. I'm very excited that on February 23rd, we have a student, we received a grant through the Foundation of Seacoast Health. NAMI, the train for doing suicide training with students. There's already students who have come forward that are very interested. It's kind of a train the trainer model. So they'll train along with 15 teachers, I think it's 15 teachers, and then the students, the full day of training. And to be able to, because we, as a staff, have had many of our staff members fit the NAMI training. And it really does, you take away a lot. And then also it really sort of opens the world of being alert to suicide prevention and really, just how to stay on top of that. So we're excited about that. The student training happens, like I said, on February 23rd. So major initiatives with future budget implications. I just mentioned NEAS, not like it's a major one, but just have it on the radar because we are currently in our self-study year, our self-assessment year. I call it self-reflection. But anyway, we're in that currently, have a great steering committee team, done some good work in that. Whether or not, because it obviously what comes out of that is like the beginning of a growth plan. And I don't know, but I just wanted to keep it on your radar. And then also, we do have a number of people who are retiring this year. And we are looking at sort of assessing, because we do our schedule based on student requests and needs, but we're looking at that immediately and then also long-term in terms of filling those positions. So it's not necessarily that if you lose somebody in a particular department that it's funneled to that specific department. We're looking at where we get the, I guess, biggest bang for our buck is as our thought process. So and then I don't know if it's a budget implication, but we just had a meeting today around the Locker Bay areas. And it was a very productive meeting. Oh, Karen was there. She's got lots of plans for those Locker Bays. And so, but to use the space and not only appealing, but also to use it so that we are spreading students out, we have that opportunity. And just really to make the most of that as a learning space. And so we are working on that and looking at potentially other homes. So, we have a full day of PD planned on March 25th, and I'm very excited about. We connected with Jay McTee, who's, if you've ever heard of him, he's kind of the guru of understanding by design. And the staff is going to delve into this important work with a focused workshop on summative assessments. We're planning on some additional days in the summer for a cohort of teachers from various departments, hopefully, to follow up with that March PD Day work. The goal is for teachers to develop an array of assessments, multiple means for students to demonstrate mastery, different ways for students to demonstrate that mastery in incorporating student choice into assessments and aligning their curriculum assessments. I mentioned that the last time that the English department was working on revising its offerings for grades 11 and 12, and so more students can take classes of high interest, personal value. They have really worked a lot on that. We added a number of new writing and reading courses for juniors to pick from, with the majority of them also having honors options. I sent, hopefully you could get it, the Clipper wall that to sit and take a look at where kids, because kids have started hearing back from early action and the early decision application submission deadlines have come. So hopefully you got to see that. And then the other thing I was going to mention was that our virtual, we decided, because we were supposed to have Step Up Day starting anyway, there were two that were planned, 2 days that were planned in January and we held off. So, just to be on the safe side, also I think it was really well done. Looking at just possibilities, we decided to do it virtual again this year. So we're doing a virtual step up day. We've reached out to the schools that we, you know, that participated last year, which was all, any feeder school. And just to get a sense of, from feedback on them on what we could do better this go around. And so we're working on setting those up. So it'll be a virtual step up day for those incoming ninth graders. And I think, oh, I mentioned about all of our, I think I gave you a whole slew of department department updates. Our school testing day on March 23rd. Of course, the 9th and 10th graders will take the PSATs and the juniors will take the SATs. The rest of the stuff was all department updates. I just had one that I was going to mention in addition to, because we had on Friday, Ahmed Nada set the school record in the 55-meter dash with a time of 6.67. And additionally, Michael Shaw, Evan Ben, Nathan Fletcher, and Jake Haley set the school records in the 4x400 relay. So that was pretty cool. And then the rest you have in your packet for updates. That's up. I think I talked long enough. If you have any questions or comments or anything else, I'm here.
Go ahead, Jeff.
Thanks, Mary, that was great to hear what's going on. I have a couple questions about the professional development that, the understanding by design that you mentioned, are you trying to work everybody into that, or how are people, are they elected to do that, or how is that?
Yeah, they're not. Well, it's core teachers, all the core teachers.
Okay. And then similarly, the NAMI workshop, is that how are kids choosing to do that, or how, or is that optional?
That was interest and that was optional.
For teachers as well.
And it was for teachers as well. And
How many
interest
people did you say you had signed up?
that, well, I'm not sure about how many students. I should know, but I'm not sure about that. But she had the student interest and the student volunteers like almost immediately. So I feel like there were probably more, I don't know, I shouldn't say, but it seemed like she had that, she was like all excited because she had already had the student cohorts. And then there were 15 teachers.
There's some required teacher trainings with NAMI too.
Yes, yeah,
I've
we did.
mentioned, yeah, just this is a different.
Lisa, go ahead.
I really appreciate how much focus you're putting on wellness and mental health. Our kids and our teachers really need that right now. I wonder if you could speak at all to anything you might be doing differently right now, particularly for those kids in transition years, whether it's the seniors who are maybe going to be going on to a weird sort of virtual strange college, or the eighth graders who are coming up and may not really get the normal transition. Are you planning anything different to support those kids, either academically or socially or from their mental health?
Yeah, so, well, the incoming ninth graders, because we did talk, obviously the virtual step up day. One of the things that we were hoping to do differently is they do a tour, because it makes them feel like they do a tour of the school, and last year we did have some students sort of do that, but there wasn't a big engagement in it, basically, because it was just sort of like they just took you around the school, you couldn't ask questions. So this year, I think we're working on it because Brittany Lynn had mentioned that the colleges do a lot of the virtual tours, but you actually go like virtually, and then you can interact and ask questions. And so we're hoping to set it up like that, which would be really cool. Then the other thing is hopefully things will be better by the end of the year as well. We did have the Portsmouth Middle School, because the SAU 50 kids, unfortunately, we just didn't know by the time we were going to set it up to have them come at the sort of like a, not kind of like, you know, like a welcome, and have the staff welcome, and they just kind of came up at the end of the year. And so we're looking to make sure that we have something like that for all of the kids entering the school. Do it early enough so that of somebody entering or left school or finished school earlier than the other. We don't want that. We want to do it early enough and have them have some day where they do come up and we kind of like welcome them as a community. As far as the other end of things, getting ready for colleges, I think that's really a great question because there are differences in what schools are offering and what their environment is like. I think that actually plays to for some students it plays in their decision making, to be honest with you, or even like we had probably more deferrals last year, those kinds of things. But it's a really good question and I'm not quite sure what different things are happening to prepare those students. And I think, to follow up with Brittany Lynn and Amy Donovan, because I'm not really sure how they're, addressing, the differences because of COVID going on. I know we try as a school to have as normal, a day as possible. These are not normal, but besides the face mask, really to try to encourage whatever we can do to have them socially together. Students are, I think this year, finding more actual being together as opposed to just being on social media or, on their texting each other or something. But it's an interesting question and one that what are we doing differently to prepare for colleges if they are not having, for their mental well-being, if it's not, just a typical going on to college.
Yes, Hope. I think that's a hard one to solve for Mary, having.
I'm sorry, what?
I think that's a hard one to solve for having a kid in college. That education across the board, especially in college, is a moving target. So, I just have a couple of things for you. One, I've heard all about the locker bays, and in my house, it's an ongoing conversation of excitement. So kudos to you guys for thinking about how to use ESSER funds in a good creative way to space. I know is at a premium at the high school, and that's definitely just wasted space right now. So I love the idea that you guys are thinking about what the kids' struggles were of needing more space in the pandemic, and you're reaching out to make some solutions around that. I also just wanted to ask about the NAMI student training. So that's, you said it was February 23rd. Is that for all grade levels?
She did open it up to all grade levels as far as representation from each grade level, and she has representation, I think, maybe not seniors.
Okay, is there still space to sign up, and how would kids sign up?
Yeah, I don't think there's any more space for students.
Okay.
And like I said, the grant was the NAMI training, and then it's kind of those students will be trained, and then we're looking at kind of a trainer.
Okay, so I guess maybe that's a follow-up question of will these students be partnering with our wellness committee to try to do some work of train the trainer and other work of just kind of get the word out around the mental health biases and understanding of suicide and how to.
I think a lot of the wellness committee volunteered to go to this training, but yes, and Eileen's the kind of the go-to person after we've made the connection with the foundation and got the grant. She's really kind of taken charge in organizing and helping with the day. So, and she does the wellness committee as well. So definitely partner.
Okay, and then my last question was, you mentioned opportunities around communication, and I appreciate that it's on the list. Awareness is, always a good thing. I'm wondering what specific strategies the high school might be employing. I know you spoke of some things that you did to kind of circle back around the recent events, but I just mean overall communication kind of comes up as an issue, and I know it's a struggle with that many kids and that many staff members and social media today. But what if any strategies are being taken at the high school just to kind of continue to improve upon communication?
With the communication overall?
Yes.
So that's a great question, because I think that to continue making sure that that we're using Parent Square, that we're putting things out there, and you monitor the number of recipients when you do it through Parent Square, which is wonderful because you get a sense. And I pause because I think that there's challenges depending on who the audience is, you know what I mean? Because I think there's, from an administrative standpoint, we've talked a lot about communication with staff, communication with students, and communication with the community and parents. And I think each one holds a different challenge, to be honest with you. And so I think from a student perspective, it's very helpful for students to be involved in decision-making, and communication kind of naturally will go from there, to be honest with you, if they're involved in the process. So you mentioned about the locker bay area. And Sarah, we had started with staff to say, department heads, you know, look at that, what about that area or whatever. And Sarah Carpenter, I had a project with her class that dealt with, you know, kids drew up plans and did things, and it was really a cool project. And it was not only the locker base, but it was like ideas for lighting in the school and all this other stuff. So it was an awesome project. But Sarah reached out, and then it was like, let's put, you know, put people together. But immediately it was like, who better to hear from about the space than the kids? So I think that being cognizant about having student voice in whatever is out there, you know, to have that just be, you know, like natural, you know, of course, if we're talking about space, we should be, you know, forming a committee, having the students, same with the NAMI training or whatever it is. So I think that that would help communication with students. And then, you know, with the staff, we've been doing more, like more, I feel like there's more opportunities for either administration to be at department meetings for, you know, not that it was, that there's been that many, but that when you have a staff meeting and there needs to be follow-up, that we just set up another meeting, whether, you know, Zoom or a smaller group or whatever. So I feel like more like physical contact, I guess, and face-to-face conversations. You know, I think we're trying that. The community piece, that was sort of my mindset, I think, in addressing it, because that's the challenge. It's from the social media standpoint, getting out ahead of it. And so in discussion around consistent protocols, so, you know, like you certainly don't want to put something out there that's not accurate or installs fear because you don't have enough information. So it's kind of like consistently following a protocol that sort of finds it in the middle of that.
Yes, it does. Super helpful. Thank you. I have two short comments. I was very lucky early in my career. I was trained by Grant Williams in Understanding by Design, and I would say it was the most transformative experience. Totally changed the way I teach and look at teaching and learning. So I am thrilled to hear that the teachers in the core classes will get that. And in fact, 3 nights ago at our dinner table, I was having a conversation with my kids about the difference between, do you just know it because you looked it over, or do you truly understand it? And how would the teacher know the difference? We were having this whole conversation about when you look at that summative assessment, how do you authentically design it in a way that gets at, do they understand it to go on to the next year? Or have they just taken some really great notes and memorized it? And in the long run, right, what you want is understanding. And I think if we can start with that in our core classes and we look at assessments, it's brilliant. So I applaud you. I hope the teachers are lucky. For me, it was, I actually still email with the people that I took that class with. It's awesome. So that strikes a chord with me. The other thing I was thinking about, I hear these questions, right? We're still all grappling with mental health post-COVID. And one of the things, I happened to be in New York post 9/11, where mental health was obviously a surprising new challenge. And what we did in our high school is everyone had to take health. but we revamped that class. So it wasn't just about drugs and alcohol, safe choices, conflict resolution, but we incorporated into that mental health, and we called it health and human relations. And it's still running today, and it's brilliant. And it's a really great, you can work in issues of equity and social justice and powerful decision-making. So I think, I'm not saying we have to change this for next year, but it'd be really great if we look at our board goals and what we already have in place and talk about small adjustments that incorporate the need. That's a place where it's already in the schedule. We already have staff on hand. If we could combine the two in a way that meets the needs of everyone, I think we'd have great success of meeting the need. And you can alter each course for what you know to be the hot buttons of that grade, and it can evolve with it. But that would be my suggestion as something to look at, because we know it's not going away. And so if we can make those small changes and proactively, seamlessly incorporate it into the high school, I think it would be a win for everyone. So that was just my 2 cents. Does anybody else have a question? Lisa?
This is such an obscure question, but I'm wondering if you can speak to what's going on with performing arts and how you're gonna maybe revamp that as kids can get back on stage and do more. I mean, particularly with theater, it's obviously been a little bit missing, and so you're gonna have a lot of kids coming in who have an interest and haven't had a chance. I know it's like a little obscure, but I felt like with sports, we really got people back on the field, and with arts, we didn't. There were reasons. There was a lot of worry about breathing and being close and all of that, but I just wondered if there's any potential to help make up the lost experiences or get that back going again in a bigger way.
Yeah, I think it's been actually, because right from the get-go a big subject of discussion from performing arts, because the concern is you haven't played, like when you think about the students in the you could have middle schoolers that just like never sang or never played, or you know, and then and you build your program from the younger grades and bring it up. So so we knew the number is going to be really low in band this year, for instance, and like expected it. And but we are putting on a spring performance, and they, you know, the kids are going in 2 weeks to LA, and there, you know, there are things happening in performing arts. And I do think that I think Steve has talked about really focusing on the elementary and middle school to build that program to you know, feed it into the high school. You know, but I do think that and Nathan does a fabulous job as our new choral teacher, and he's wonderful, and I think just, you know, the kids really connect with him and stuff. So I think it's gonna take a little time, but I do think that effort will be there to build the programs back. And the best way to do that is by having, was excited to see the band play at the football games, even if it was a smaller number, you know, and they were very active in the community over the holidays, did a number of performances. You know, it's discouraging sometimes when things, you're all ready to go and then something gets canceled, but they're plugging away, and they're, I think, excited about the trip to LA, and you know, I can see the program, you know.
Is there anything in the budget that's not there that would help that? I mean, is there a need to space them out differently or do anything else to help them have a more robust program? But you didn't see much there that looks.
So just to be clear, so we haven't reduced anything.
No, I understand that. I just wondered because they have not the ability to all cram onto the stage in the same way. So I was just curious if there's anything that would help.
Provide an outdoor space for them.
Yeah, or
Like,
give
so
them
they don't
more
have to shut down their
opportunities to
program.
practice or have
They did practice outside a lot, it's just how
Yes.
amazing. So, I mean, I can certainly follow up with Steve and Eric and Alden. I love that you asked the question, because I think that they would appreciate the support. But I do think it's a matter of just having those experiences, because when you put on a performance, the kids get excited about it, you know, the community gets excited about it. And it just continues to build the program, whether it's the choir, the band, or the theater. So, and I don't know if they're doing something also at the middle school, but I know that they're doing a spring performance.
I was actually gonna ask a very similar question, and I wonder, we've been talking about ESSER fund use, and we can discuss that tonight. Is there anything even temporarily that we might be able to provide for the music and arts programs to help them be able to, practice, I don't know, under intent or to make the adjustments that they've made around a little bit easier? Maybe that's something.
Yeah,
to
and
that as
I'm
well.
definitely to present with them, but I'm not so sure if it's the space, like they couldn't practice or the space because they kind of managed that part. It's more being able to perform. I think that's really what's hurt the program.
Other questions? Yeah, Margaret.
You mentioned the success of the homogeneous placement of students this year. Can you tell me how you're assessing that it's been successful?
Well, I don't know that if I said success for the placement, but it was a smooth transition for the incoming ninth graders. And we're all ready to go in. We didn't have I look at them. We're able to accommodate for people who went into the honors classes. And had those, it wasn't like anything different, I guess.
Let me ask you a different way. How are you going to assess the success of homogeneous placement?
So that's a good question.
I can jump in
How
with
the
it,
students
say-
perform. And, that looking at the grades as well as, the advancement to the next level, number of, if there were failures, just kind of looking at the data like we do for, anything academically to see if it was successful. I do think that, there's looking at that, we always organize the classes so that students take what they are interested in. And so some people are like a little concerned over the fact that we'll have like more numbers in people requesting to get into the students requesting to get into the honors program. And I do think that what we're looking at is that flexibility in the schedule to have the courses that are not honors still be, the bar raised in those classes, so that it would kind of even out as time goes on. But I look at if there were students who wanted to get into honors classes, that we would organize the classes to have them so that anybody, who is on that, who is enrolling in that class would be able to take it. So that's one of the things that we've been able to adjust as far as like, adding, courses that we need to, and then, evening out the other, the non-honors classes and the numbers in there. But I guess we'd just be looking at the data for student performance as well as, academically how they're performing in the classes compared to,
I just, it can't just be data only because, it's not just about the A. It's about the work that's being given to support that student. So it can't just be the fact that that student got an A, and that means it's working. Because
Well, I don't know.
I think and George, you can jump in here anytime, but I'm feeling that there's a pretty steep difference between the work level and the challenge of it at the honors level versus the non-honors level. So I just wanted to
and I definitely
express my
think
concern.
it definitely, student success is definitely not just a grade. I mean, you know what I mean, you're looking at when you go back to mental health, how much a person is struggling, you know what I mean, what supports needed to happen in order for a student to be successful in class. I mean, those are things that are all taken into consideration. as far as like, is this particular class, functioning well or doing well and being successful? Did you hear anything?
Yeah, sorry. So to add on to that, so you're saying you're planning on raising the bar for the non-honors level classes. Do you foresee any problems with involving the students who are previous in level 2 or 3 classes with the higher level, or now the higher level 4 classes? Or is that?
No, so there'd be an honors level, and then that's it. It's an honors level and everybody else.
Right. But did you not just say that you were planning on raising the bar for the other level?
Yeah, so thinking about it, because if the expectations oftentimes in a lower level class, like a level, and an applied level class, we're not always the same as the expectations, obviously, for for other level classes. And what was happening is that students were, because if some skills and things were not taught, information wasn't taught, the students who were in the class then going to the next, so say it was, algebra 1, and then you go into algebra 2. If you didn't have all the same skills as the people in level 3 or level 4, you can't, and weren't even taught them. You couldn't then obviously advance to the next level. So in a course, as far as like the next sequence in a course, course area. So what, as far as raising the bar, it would be the expectations in the class, because we focused a lot in our instruction on understanding what the competencies are for a course. So having the competencies be the same for the courses, the expectations for the courses, the differentiation comes in within the class in terms of how you meet those competencies. But what is being taught to the class as a whole is the same.
Thank you.
Yes, Liz.
I know right now is a tough time, I think, in all sectors, but obviously, I know teachers are feeling like the cold weather and everything, and COVID, and kids coming to school sick, and teachers being sick. And so I guess I'm just wondering if there's anything you see, other than what you presented tonight, that the board could do to support teachers and within the school during this time, sort of getting through the winter here.
I do think a little nice comments or a thank you, and not that you have to go out and say that to everybody, but it's just that it goes a long way, longer than it does in non-COVID days. I mean, I just think that there's, I don't know if, everybody's frustrated with, it's not just teachers, but like, as you all know, it's wearing on people. And so, so sometimes I think we can find that even a person that you might have connected with, or you're doing well, but just some odd things happen, and then you get just kind of clobbered, And I feel like what happens with teachers is that they are tired as well, and so I think, to me, just some words of encouragement or a simple thank you. I know it sounds silly, but I think they really do appreciate it, because a lot of times it's not feeling like that.
Any other questions for Mary? Carrie.
Totally super weird budget question.
Okay.
So as there's been questions about, like the budget is very similar from before, and we've been reviewing that. I'm a new member trying to learn everything. It doesn't seem like there was really much for increases, just like little things here and there, or different supplies and different lines. Is there anything that you feel like would need to be added, or that you kind of in initial talks requested, it got removed, but you'd love to see it?
I don't think I had anything that was initially requested that was removed, to be honest with you. Not that I'm really looking forward to the bleachers being changed over the summer. so nice to sit in the stands without those bleachers. No, but I don't think that anybody has, even, you know, just in the general budget, that teachers requested things that, you know, I took everything that was requested basically, and then some, I think. And I don't think anything was ever requested.
And my weird one is understanding the FTEs around music at the high school.
Okay,
Not a critique at all, I'm just curious how that works, like,
okay, so we have.
that's a separate,
Yeah.
I was gonna say, at some point, performing arts, music, everything.
that'll come together.
Yeah.
You
Okay,
may
cool.
wanna bring that conversation to you as well. You may be able to speak to some of the actual head.
Yeah, well,
count.
Eric is in our building full time.
Yep.
So band, you know, the band and music tech is a full person in our building. So then I think that you know, we have a shared staff, which is the all in for the theater arts with the middle school.
And in any given year, I can look around, I'm not the authority. In any given year, I think that you see 15% here, 15% here. I think that the personalities may change depending on the programming expectations. But I know that staff is blended across the district so that each building is getting.
Oh, same thing with
They've
Clark.
been
Same thing with
A
me.
little
they've
of
been
the
getting
spec-
what they need.
They're getting the
or-
specialties
and
that
what
they
they're
need when
asking for,
they need it,
it's not-
right?
Okay,
Yeah,
thank you.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Steve Cirillo is the performing arts director, and that's cost center he manages. And I haven't in the last year, I haven't in the last cycle said, we go back and revisit this, tell me exactly where these people, so the reality is that somebody might be 50.
They'll make it work.
It might be 50-50 somewhere, but that was the last time he and I sat down, that was how he was breaking them out for their
Gotcha.
coverage across the board. Just to try to bail Mary out, because I don't know either, and
Right.
I'd love to.
And I forgot about poor Nathan, but anyway, yeah, so we do share staff essentially.
That is probably exactly what it is.
Nancy, I hear you have a question.
You're
Oh, you're
muted,
muted,
Nancy.
Okay, I just want to say thank you to Mary for all the hard work that she's done over the past couple of years, particularly in dealing with the COVID crisis, and your staff. I mean, I think you've managed your staff really well, and obviously the students too. And, you know, we need people like you to keep the ball rolling and keep the ship afloat, as they say. And I just have a question. Do you feel that students, have they risen to the top a little bit because of COVID? I mean, do they work harder academically because they know that last year they were remote, or they just have to put in a little bit more to reach the standard that they want to reach? I'm trying to look at a positive outcome that maybe COVID has had on us.
Well, that's good. We all try to find something positive about COVID. I think that students are, and I'm gonna ask, not put you on the spot, Nick, but I think that the students are more stressed, to be honest with you. I don't know if that equals working harder. I think it's more of a challenge to work harder, maybe, but they are definitely, I think, more stressed. But you can say.
Yeah, I think I'm inclined to agree with that. I mean, I know of a lot of people who have been working harder recently. I think in part that's just because junior year is more intense. Those are the people I'm talking to most. Yeah, I should say though, changes in the schedule last year especially, honestly, just the inherent challenges with living in COVID. And yeah, also, especially in performing arts, but also in general, we've seen a lot of drops in club memberships kind of across the board. So the loss of extracurriculars in a lot of ways has also been a major problem with stress. So yeah, I would say that's been the biggest impact, unfortunately. I don't know if the academics have been quite so positive, including based on what I've seen from previous reports here as well. So yeah, unfortunately not.
Thank you. Yes, thank you.
Well, thank you, Mary, for coming in and sharing the status of the high school.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Mary.
Thank you, Nancy.
I'm gonna turn it over to Steve for the superintendent's report.
Yeah, not much. You have the email correspondence and summary since your last meeting, and other than that, it's Nathan's financial report. So I will turn it over there.
So I say welcome to new board members for whom this may be the first time we've talked about financials, although I think you were all in the audience more than once as we reviewed. I'll say what I've said, I guess, the last few months is, there's no real messages here yet. Other than say in the salaries at the first page of your financial report speaks to salaries and benefits. And I take 30 seconds and say, if you haven't heard me suggest this or report this out before, your first column is what you've spent year to date. Your second column is what the plan, so the 5-year rolling average of what you normally are doing this time of year would propose you might expect to be doing at this point. And then that variance column just compares the actual to the plan. There's a missing element, which is to make sure you don't see red and get nervous by taking the far left column, that first column of numbers, the actual, and going to the next to last column, which is the budget. Because you see red, and yet it's only a comparison against where you might expect to be at this point in terms of total amount spent. It's not compared to budget. So when you see red, it doesn't necessarily mean I'm over budget, because in fact, I think we're not over budget anywhere. So it's a tool to help you get a sense of where you might be running ahead or behind projections normally. So if you take a peek down that center variance column in salaries, some numbers quickly jump out at you. There's a significant savings potentially. You're running really behind in clericals. There's $55,000 you see there as a leftover. Well, that's because we've had a couple of vacancies and are working to fill, but there's going to be dollars left over. I don't expect there'll be that much left over, but there will be money left over in that line because of the vacancy. The same is true in custodial down below. Mr. Lynch's been working hard to try to cover his vacancies. We've been at least 2 positions open most of the year, although those have been changing. You get one filled and then another pops open. And we also have a vacancy on the maintenance. So those things pop out. Right now, you are running ahead of projection, normally the normal plan in terms of substitutes. But if you compare your 185 to your 3.25 of budget, the reality is we're not over budget right now, but we're running faster. And so it's predictable that may end up over. That ends up over a lot, I think. It has the last few years. One of the things that I'll try to pay attention to more down the stretch is, are there positions in substitutes that are long-term subs who are covering for teachers who are not returning? So normally if the teachers are out and collecting sick leave, they still get charged with the teacher salary line. But if at some point the teacher is going to extend their absence for some reason and is no longer collecting salary, then the long-term sub ought to come out of sub to go to the teacher line. And when those things happen, you see that it reduces what the impact is looking like. So if I keep going and skim down through your second page, you'll see the building budgets and then the departments, and you'll see instructional supports. Some of those things are running again ahead of plan in terms of the speed with which we're spending, but they're not running ahead of budget. In an area where you're talking about instructional support or student support, and dollars are being spent a little sooner, not necessarily a bad thing, because it means we're taking the dollars, putting it to benefit in the classrooms with our students instead of holding out of them for what may come. Some of what's happening is, remember, we went through and took $300,000+ of cuts in the operating area in this budget, knowing that we'd pick those up if we had to, COVID or other resources. So in some cases, they're running at their normal clip, but it means they're running ahead of what they should have expected based on the budgets. We've talked in the past, if you get, I'm on page 3 now, down to central office and school board. In central office, we prepaid for the school resource officer for the whole year. We just did that one transfer to the city side. So that is ahead of plan. We see a red. In the school board, we engaged in someone to support our search, which was a cost that wasn't budgeted there specifically, so it's bigger than what that line would normally have held. So you see a variance. And then at the bottom of that section, you see that 129,000. That's a number that we've been talking about. We charged into that some COVID-related expenditures They're on that pink sheet that we talked about briefly last night, we'll talk about again tonight. So all in, not a lot of messages there other than we've had some vacancies. But right now it still feels good and I think we're managing fiscal 22 pretty well.
Do we have many teachers who have COVID or will we anticipate to be out for a really long time that they would be?
We haven't, we've got a lot of standard 5 to 10 days.
Karen?
With this budget, and just remind me, we review the city-related expenses. We don't necessarily review other funds or income.
This is the tax impact. The tax
To the
impact general fund, yeah.
Liz?
Are we gonna be running into any sort of deficit here when it comes to special ed as far as the out of district placement? I mean, obviously, there's obviously an increase in behavioral issues and whatnot. So, I mean, I'm here, we're looking at out of district tuition is over by 46K. I guess I'm just wondering, is that normal to sort of see that number there? Or, I mean, are we gonna be sort of falling short when it comes to?
It's a big area that you can run short in.
Yeah.
So in our proposed budget, and we met with Director Souther recently, right? She's got $383,000 worth of tuitions and services increase for next year. That's based on the kids she knows she has this year.
Yeah.
So we are watching that. Although remember, again, reading this, the way this report works, read that we have 905,000 spent to date. And although that shows as a red, the budget is 2.5 million.
Yeah.
So we're already into January. This is the December report. So we're at December ending and we spent 900 against 2.25 or 2.5 million. So I haven't looked at that with her in the last month, but I know when we looked at budget, there was an expectation that we needed to make increases for next year. And this year will be one of those narrow years where we expect that we may challenge that budget, but it's not going to be challenged by $500,000 or something big. It's going to be something that hopefully will be manageable. And right when we last talked about it, which was really in November when she was helping put together the beginnings of her budget, and then first week of December, it didn't look like we were going to go over budget grossly.
I'm curious why we are running over right now in the district-wide assessment category. This is based on
We made initial payments out of that earlier this year than we have in past years. All in that cost center, I think is going to be over budget, ultimately by about $1,000. Really, that's because we took $1,000 of it out for those reductions that were kind of across the board. But I think that that's probably all that you'll see spent there. So they've spent the entirety of that budget for the year, which is ahead of schedule maybe to have done that, but
So it's just paid early.
it's just, now I'm back to Mr. Bartlett, my predecessor, used to just say, well, it's all about timing. And so in this case, it's about, they burn that. The other thing is that sometimes in the assessment area, I think some of those costs get shared with some of the grant funded opportunities. In this case, we hit this earlier than we normally would. Great question.
Karen?
Could line 190, Center 199, the COVID. Can you just explain that? I know we're going to talk about ESSER, but was that not budgeted because of, we think it's going under ESSER, or why is it showing up in this report?
So don't charge, make my life a little more manageable, and don't charge the masks that you purchased in the supply line in somewhere in the budget line. Charge the masks here. If ultimately we don't charge that off to ESSER because it's PPE and it's a logical connection with COVID, if we decide we can afford it, maybe I move that into a supply line in one of the buildings. But don't make me go looking for all of the possible COVID costs.
I won't do that again to you, Nathan. I'm really sorry.
No, I mean, this was a conversation I had with someone.
Totally.
Here, put them here. And so when you see that pink sheet, That's costs that seem to be easily connected in a layup for COVID. And we put them in this account that you see as a catch-all. What that account normally is, it's, we're spending this, but then we're getting a check from the student activity account, it's gonna wash it away. And so I try to look at that, review it quickly, make it look like zero every month, because it's normally coming in and going out. In this case, once COVID hit, we started using that as a whole new bucket for costs that need to be reallocated off to the federal ESSER monies or off to wherever we decide to ultimately charge. And I think that's one of the dynamics that has been in play with the things that show up on that pink sheet. As we've gone through COVID, we have been able to, let me use the phrase, we've been able to eat some expenses. We've been able to just absorb them in, we didn't do this and we didn't do that, so we bought some of the COVID stuff, or we hired somebody that did this. A lot of those things have managed to make their way into the general fund. And to be fair, our perspective has been right along. If we can afford it, let's do it, and let's save those ESSER opportunities for things that we may yet not know about, that may come later in the pandemic, or that we may need some time to contemplate, then realize that's a great idea, we really want to do that. So yeah, so it's here so that we can identify it, and we can easily take it and reallocate it later when we make the decision.
Any other questions? Seems like a good segue to move into workshop session 3 with our pink and blue.
Absolutely is. So I will try to do is get the blue sheet up to the audience. But if you take out your blue sheet that we handed out last night, I'm not taking it. I have some updates.
You don't have to throw it, especially as notes, but I did make a couple of minor changes so that it's easier to I just put, take a note if you want. I just, but if you get confused, no worries. I just put some asterisks on to make the whole linking from this to the pink sheet. I wanted to make that make more sense. I'm broadcasting.
So what you have before you in the blue sheet is a first rough draft, and I emphasize rough draft, of some of the considerations for the use of ESSER funds, which has come out of needs we are aware of, interests and ideas that this board has talked about, as well as a survey we distributed to the community back in October. So what we've done is created a draft. What we would propose is that we discuss this draft with you tonight, and that we also invite the public to have feedback on the draft and see as we go how this conversation may evolve in the use of our ESSER funds. The reason we're bringing it up now, of course, is that as we talk about the FY23 budget, there may be things we talk about moving out of the budget into ESSER and out of ESSER into the budget, depending on how the operating budget we get to a final vote number for that. So I thought I would start by walking you through a little bit of this, and primarily just to go ahead and hit the first chunk, which is the largest chunk. As you know, we have closer to $4 million of ESSER funds total, all of the from CARES Act on through. And we have, again, a number of different interests we'll go over. But I kind of wanted to talk about this $2 million possibility with the community campus purchase first. And I guess I would start by dialing back to our work around elementary school facilities. And we have an elementary school facilities committee of this board that met regularly to talk about the work going through from initial renovation with Little Harbor to Dondero to what we're finishing off with at Franklin now. And we also knew that out of all of that work in the high school having been renovated back in the early 2000s to the middle school 10, 12 years later, we knew the only building left on the circuit would be Sherburne School over that houses the Lister Academy. So back when we first were starting to see that light at the end of the tunnel for the elementary projects, but before we were done with them, we had to put some money into the CIP for Sherburne School. So we had a plug number in the CIP that was $2.5 million for the Sherburne School, and that had stayed in there for a year, even got kicked out a couple of times, I think, as the CIP kept in development. And I wanted to point that out because the 2.5 million wasn't a number that came out of thin air. When you're trying to talk 5 years ahead, you really don't have a good sense of the real cost it's going to be to renovate or to what scale you are, especially when you're in the middle of the other renovations at the time. But when you look at the money we spent on the middle school renovation, which was in the upper 40s, $40+ million. And if you look at that with the middle school population, you might reasonably make a calculation of what we're spending per pupil, if you will, for this renovation. And if we dial that back to the Sherburne School and say at the time we had 25 students in there, what would be the equivalent proportional dollars we would be spending at the Sherburne program as we just did at the middle school? You came up with a figure of about $2.5 million. So dial a couple steps forward in the story to, we're getting closer, we're finishing off the elementary school renovations, we're starting to look at Sherburne a little more closely. And of course, lo and behold, as we kind of know in renovations, especially as we learned in Little Harbor and Dondero, where we started with a $5 million number and ended up chasing $10 million in each of those renovations, it's just more expensive. I mean, when you, and especially as you get in there and you say, wow, this is the opportunity, we have to take advantage of it. So all of a sudden, Little Harbor that doesn't have walls, we talk about renovating the whole thing and adding walls into the school. So as we looked at Sherburne and we started to say, what would it take to build a comparable renovation at Sherburne that we would have had at Little Harbor and Dondero, all of a sudden we're back to an $8+ million number. And so the $2.5 million, which started as a placeholder, kind of became, okay, what can we buy actually for $2.5 million? As we go through that process, we realized we could do the basic code compliance. We could do some of the abatement that we need to do around asbestos, whatnot. But we wouldn't really get a full out HVAC renovation. We wouldn't get a full out, by any means, cosmetic renovation or anything that came close to the other schools. And so it brought us to some conversations about what else could be a home for Lister Academy, knowing that that was going to be, could be cost prohibitive. We were certainly getting signals from the process through the CIP when that would come up in the 4-year outer year that, wow, that's like a lot of money for such a small program. So anyway, I bring all of that up as backstory to a couple of points. One is that when we looked at proportional spending to our most vulnerable students, it came out to $2.5 million. And this was even before equity was our true clear goal. So I first want to make a case that whatever we do with Sherburne, or whatever we do with the Lister Academy program more specifically, we really should be looking at that in proportional spending for that program. That being said, we are of course mindful of the taxpayer dollar. And so when we look at what the options for that program are, we started to look at other places it could locate. And what came up as a really interesting opportunity was community campus. At the time, New Heights was still there. At the time, there were some open space, but we were wondering about sharing space and whatnot. And so what we would have been doing in that case is entering into a lease agreement to get space at a place like community campus. So now fast forward one more step to the fact that the city took a stronger interest in actually purchasing community campus. The city approached us to be a capital partner in that purchase at a cost of $2 million, which is what we started to look at is ESSER funds appropriate for that purchase, and to be a capital partner with the city in purchasing the building. And the advantage, if we were to go down that road, would be actual ownership, which we would work with the city. We work very well with the city around MOUs and other agreements we have with them for how we would have control essentially of 20% of that facility. What we would do with that is certainly prioritize the location of Lister Academy over into that facility. We would also look at opportunities to have synergy with the entities that are already over there. So Lister Academy, we already had some conversations with Lister Academy staff, opportunities with the Krempel Center, opportunities with Seacoast Community School, opportunities with adult ed. There are so many different entities out there that could be wonderful partners, actually allow for mentorships, even internships with some of our Lister Academy students. And so aside from that, we have a discussion of opportunities of what we might create in terms of another program element over there. Right now, when a student needs a short-term intensive support, we look to entities such as Kittery Academy or other places that do more of a tutoring model for support, keep students current with coursework, help catch them up, do those kinds of things. And so in addition to some Lister Academy students, we actually have high school students from the high school that utilize that kind of a program. If we were to develop a similar type of program at community campus, it wouldn't just help with the Lister Academy students, keeping them in-house, but it would also service some of our high school students that we currently pay to send to those programs. I guess that's one other point I would make about the Lister Academy program. I think you all know this, but that program doesn't just serve as a wonderful opportunity of alternative education for our students. It saves the taxpayer by limiting our need to send students out of district at much greater expense. And so when we talk about those 20 students currently, remember that is those students would potentially cost the district disproportionately a whole lot more if we weren't able to have them successful in a program like that. So again, it comes back to essentially, when we think about this purchase, not only the equity issue and the proportionality of spending for those students, but it also comes back to what are we talking about in terms of the benefit to the taxpayer? If the alternatives for this would actually cost well above the $2 million, or over time, because even if we enter into a lease agreement somewhere, eventually, for whatever period of time that is, in some of our calculations, it might be 8 or so years, even at the, say, the community campus leasing space at say $15 a square foot, that would be wherever we may end up into a lease agreement. So there is absolute benefit to owning the building in terms of the long-term exposure for a program like that as well. So I bring that up for the first conversation around the $2 million of ESSER funds. That does leave a good chunk of money still in this draft proposal for other needs, and I would highlight, and I would ask Nathan to embellish anything here, but in terms of the survey results we had, there were comments about AC at our schools that don't have AC. They're primarily of our elementary schools at Little Harbor and Dodero, and so we would contemplate at least cooling spaces in those buildings. We're talking about those few days on the shoulder months that really go well above and beyond tolerance for heat and how we use that space. We have used these monies already for technology, and so we would contemplate using it additionally for a couple of years to come for Chromebooks and technology as we go through those cycles. We also know that a lot of these dollars are earmarked for what would be termed learning loss, or other programs that could be tutorial in nature, could be summer programming, could be extended day programming. So while we've already started some of that, we had a program starting last summer. We contemplate continuing those programs over the next 2 summers, as well as expanding some of our other extended day programming. We would also, in elementary principals, will speak about this with you on Tuesday. We also are developing a proposal around elementary outdoor education, which could involve an actual position dedicated to that effort, and that you'll hear more about. That's not in your current 4.9-ish% budget, but the one below it, the social worker, is. So what we would suggest is that we move that social work position into ESSER because it's appropriate, and it would also have the effect of reducing the ask in the operating budget. And then the number below that is to assume that in year 2, we wouldn't absorb all of those salaries, but perhaps half. So we would think about a year 2 transition by absorbing half of those salary positions. And again, already talked about the summer programming. And then the wellness activities is really just a number that's out there to inspire the creativity of our staff and student wellness committees that might suggest activities that would have a cost associated with them. And let's talk about the wellness fairs or other guest speakers or other things that we might be able to do, or other therapeutic supports cetera, we might want to bring in. I think there are a lot of ideas out there, and our wellness committee has continued to put ideas on the table. So that's the first sheet, and I'll stop talking and hand this over to Nathan to catch up on anything I missed. The other sheet that you have, which is the pink sheet, I would just clarify that on the far left, the LL are those items that we could reasonably attribute to learning loss. And that's where we could, again, some of those dollars that already are spent or could be spent, that we would categorize as such, because we do have an amount we have to use for learning loss. So Nathan?
Yeah, so certainly can take questions and, but the pink sheet identifies, as specifically as I thought I could fit on the page, but it identifies dollars that have been expended and that are sitting now either in that line we just got done talking about in the general fund, or in House Center 99903 in federal grants right beside these ESSER funds in the books. And so all of those costs are sitting here. Many of them, maybe not all of them reasonably, but certainly many of them could be reallocated somewhere else in the budget. If ultimately, as we get to the end of the year, we find that we have dollars available, or we haven't expended on supplies the way we might have expected, et cetera. But we have moved forward doing some of these things. One, because we had done them in the previous year, or two, because we simply needed to, and three, because we took a substantial hit against our operating accounts. And when I say operating, for those of you looking at this stuff for the first time, Portsmouth talks a lot about salaries, benefits, and operating. So everything that falls in the non-human capital kind of category, contracted services, supplies and material, equipment, and even dues, fees, and miscellaneous, that whole end of the spectrum is operating. And so across the board last year, to try to meet the expectations expressed by the city council and keep our budget increase down, recognize that we still ended up with a 2.87, I think, % increase overall. But we had cost of living increases and benefit increases and the like for staff. So we were trying to accommodate all of the natural increases and still bring the budget lower. We reduced over $300,000 worth of operating. So some of these items show up because they were items that we felt we could not charge into the budget because of the cuts and still find a way to pick up with ESSER if need be. So again, if you have any questions, I think they're fairly self-explanatory as you march down through. Chromebooks and programs, tent rentals. Operation Blessing was an outstanding summer enrichment program that was run this summer. We have software, HVAC filtration. Maybe one of the biggest things that popped up. Where is it? Oh, there you go. Down to about the middle of the page, with the second little short list. Upgrade fountains to water stations. There was a significant effort that Mr. Lynch did across the district, replacing water fountains with the water fill stations, because leaning over the multi-use fountains ceased to be a reasonable expectation. So yeah, so I present that to you. If you see at the bottom, the LL of 100,000 summarizes those that could reasonably, we think, be charged off as learning loss related, and then 227 is the balance. Those are the numbers that show up on the blue sheet with a couple of asterisks. I just brought them forward so that we would have that for conversation.
Excuse me, Nathan. The White Pines, the 6210 on White Pines, what was that for? I was under the impression from their presentation that they had a grant for White Pines.
We have a grant for the teacher instruction and professional development. It's what we pay through Title IIA. The other aspect of the facilitated recesses and the work in the transportation is not in the grant. So the grants for the professional development of Title IIA. We also have the facilitated recess aspect.
When did that come about? Because during the presentation, we questioned the transportation and we were told it was covered under the grant. From what I recall.
We can't cover the transportation under the grant. So And the transportation aspect is negligible. It's mostly the facilitated recess.
Have we revisited that I mean, I know it was brought up before in board meeting around the transportation, even though it is negligible around using the outdoor. I mean, all of our schools have some type of really fantastic outdoor components to them right at the doorstep. And it does seem that if we're wanting our kids to learn about outdoors, what better place to do it in their own environment. And then when they're out on recess every day thereafter, there's a kind of invested interest in the habitat and environment around them. So
We discussed this back then. The plan for this year as set forth is for the 3 schools to converge on the urban forestry center, and that's where they've designed their programming for this year.
There's, thank you for all this and for outlining it, and I want to acknowledge too that to do what you're doing and moving funds and allowing allowable costs and things like that is a major undertaking, which I just know personally, and you're doing it with not a full staff.
Without an accountant.
I just want to say that I get it, and I know it's hard to then bring all these budgets here. I think, so one of the things as different spaces are talked about, one thing I haven't heard tonight that I think I heard before in our previous meetings is that and we talked about air conditioning, but the air
Quality. Air handling.
handling, thank you. And that's like the big thing that brings the Lister renovation up to 8 million-ish, is that correct?
It's a big part. I mean, further scrutiny on the building says that the Sherburne School needs to pull new electrical service from the street. It needs to revamp there's a lot. Moving air, I mean, that's the only structure that we have. Thankfully, New Franklin got full air handling, duct work and fresh air return the summer before COVID hit. This summer, we'll extend air conditioning throughout that building. It's a CIP funded program that has been in the works and in the schedule for a period of time. But the Sherburne School that hosts or that houses Lister really has nothing. It doesn't even necessarily have effectively open windows in every room and every space. And so we moved portable solutions, portable units in to try to do the best we could to handle that air. But yeah, in the long run, it would need ductwork, it would need rooftop units, et cetera.
And so I think I totally understand from, or my just perspective around grants, that this piece of putting this, if approved, community campus purchase in here. I just wonder though, as we don't know, we thought we would be out of this at this point and not in masks, and here we are, not knowing what's coming and maybe some of the future learning loss and things like that. From a grants management and budgeting standpoint, would you see opportunity to maybe put this here, but add sort of more flexible funds for learning loss into our city budget, similar to what you did around the social worker and elementary education, that we as a school board and as the school department have more control over?
Yes. I mean, we could, it's funny because I'm not sure if it's an answer to your question specifically, but we have in my discipline been kind of sitting around with fingers crossed, expecting that more dollars may yet come.
Right.
That there will be another initiative that will bring dollars. And each time there has been a congressional initiative or a federal initiative that has launched more money in our direction, it has come with different strings and greater expectations. The first couple of rounds were somewhat emotional and knee-jerk. I don't mean to characterize any of the work that was done in Washington, D.C. as unprofessional, but it was a rush. Get it out, and we don't care. Like, do whatever you got to do. This most recent round has a lot of strings attached. So we expect that although there might be challenges to the flexibility that we want, there may yet be more dollars coming. Certainly, I think that
we can always benefit from having flexibility in our budgets to be able to address these needs. And not all of these dollars that are being discussed or being laid out right now, not all these dollars immediately get spent. I mean, there's a lot of placeholders. So I think there's a lot of potential here for the shifting sands of what still comes. I thought where your conversation was going was, or where your question might head was, can we think yes about $2 million, for instance, but reserve the right to cash out a piece of that if we have greater needs than we anticipated before we get to the deadlines or to the final commitment? And I think that any details like that really are appropriate in the conversation about the agreements that might exist or that should exist between the school department and the city surrounding any decision that you make concerning community campus. The city is executing, last I knew, they're executing on that final sale of the purchase next week. It was targeted for January 31st. It may have pushed, but that was the plan. And the city will move ahead with the financing plan that they have in place in the absence of our contribution. And once they have effected that, I don't know what the timing expectation would be. They're looking at how they'll finance it, the short-term borrowing and long-term borrowing, and I'm not sure how they'll proceed, but that may create all kinds of flexibility for us to change our minds. And I think one of the things that's different here, way off topic necessarily, but trying to tie it back, one of the things that I have found that never existed for me in the independent school districts that I've served in elsewhere in the Seacoast. Former assistant mayor Splain said more than once, I heard him on camera and off, if you find that you need more, just come on back and let us know. Well, there is no come on back and let us know in schools in general, but the city actually creates that kind of flexibility, that there is the potential for, yes, we could reach to that bucket or to this emergency reserve and address the needs that you might have. So as we look at everything that we're trying to do with these funds and everything that we may face in the coming years, as this pandemic becomes whatever it continues to become, I think there's flexibility with the city that I never imagined having in a public school the way I had experienced, but it's true here.
Lisa. I have a question. I apologize. I may not just be familiar with the space, but for that 20% of 2 million, are we physically getting enough space to house the kids that are at Lister with sort of the same level of services and instructional? I just don't know what community campus physically looks like inside. I think I've been in the lobby a few times, but I don't know like which piece do we get, and have we looked at that, or do we know sort of square footage wise?
Yes, I can share with you some. There's
You could say yes, like I don't need you to like.
No, but I think it's worth you knowing, because I don't know that we talked about it, but the structure over there is not quite 80,000 square feet. It's 74,556 on the tax card. You could look it up and see that. There's an expectation in the initial drafts. So let me back up just 1 second and say, as a purchase and sale was drafted and the city sat at the table with the Foundation for Seacoast Health, a committee was formed, largely the city side, but they invited the schools to participate. So I've sat at that, the handful of times that we've met. They gained access to a recent budget draft, if you will, of accounts and spending and contracts that the foundation had for that building, and they initially chunked up the building between the current tenants, city elements other than us, and our square footage in that draft is roughly 19,000 square feet, which is measurably, which is greater than what we have for usable space right now at the Sherwood School.
Okay.
So that certainly leaves enough room, I think, for that program and some of the others that Steve was making reference to.
One thing, again, if timelines go as we expect, and the city closes on the building, and the space we're talking about, just to be clear, is what is currently occupied by Families First. We would love to get a tour, because they're also soon moving out of that space. School board.
Liz?
I have 2 questions. I guess I'm wondering if there's any money that can be spent now as a board, if we can make a decision to spend any of these monies now, or any sort of priorities now sort of backdating, adding into the prior budget. For example, I guess I'm thinking, each elementary school besides Don Darrow has 2 guidance counselors. We're talking about adding a social worker in. I guess I'm wondering, I do think, we've obviously seen increased behavioral issues and whatnot going on. And I guess I'm wondering if any of these things can get approved, sort of backdated into the prior budget to get a social worker in as soon as possible, or to, increase the guidance with ESSER funds as soon as possible versus waiting to sort of make decisions for the next budget. So I guess I'm assuming that this is part, the proposals here are kind of tied into the future budget, right? So, so I guess I'm just curious if any of those things could be put forward. Maybe they're already posted and we're just not
Yeah,
getting
so I
anybody.
mean, I think, so first of all, it's really a practical matter, which is when we talk about school positions, there's a certain season of when you want to be out there for candidates. We did post for a social worker mid-year. Every once in a while, I'll come to Nathan, because this is the problem, right? Is that it's not actually in the budget, but we know there's a need. So every once in a while, especially as we look at the trends in the budget and say, you know what? Looks like we're pretty good. We haven't hired enough paraprofessionals for the first half of the year. We know there's some little salary money out there. We did put out for a social worker. We did not get any suitable applicants. I think that's the challenge in trying to do it right now, Liz.
Okay.
If we wait and look at the timing for next year, I think that works.
So to be more specific, in the financial report, I said, look, there's a big number here because we've had a vacancy in clerical, we've got a vacancy in, and so even though there isn't a social worker there are dollars and there is vacancy. And so, yes, you could do some of that. Let me also say that everything we're talking about on the blue sheet, and again, just more backstory. So we get an allocation. This is also true for federal grants in general. George mentioned Title II-A earlier. Jeanette talked about IDEA funds for special ed. The state maintains a portal. It's a system they call grants management system. And it's a solution through which we apply, gain approval from the Department of Ed, and then can expend against that plan and claim for reimbursement. But it's always a reimbursement. So everything that's on that blue sheet are allocations that are available to us now in the grants management system. What we need to do is make decisions locally and then complete an application, let the department review and approve, and then we can go ahead and spend. So this is it's not really yeah, you can spend this tomorrow, although practically speaking, you could. I mean, we've already listed some of these things that we expect to put in the application. So yes, adding on to what Steve just said, you could begin to spend these on any of these purposes, assuming it was your decision and we went ahead with the application and it was approved. And then again, you have to spend it first and we'll get 3%.
And then, so I know some of the line items you've moved into, our regular line items you've moved into ESSER funds, or we end up seeing them in line items. I guess I'm wondering if there's maybe any benefit to taking some line items and throwing them into ESSER, knowing that they likely get approved, and then creating or keeping that COVID line item and it's sort of addressing more COVID concerns in a line item versus having money sitting on the table that maybe we could just go ahead and put into some of our line items that are already there. Does that make sense? Versus like maybe like shifting the budget around, I don't know.
I think we're trying to achieve the same thing,
Okay.
honestly, because as he has that line COVID expenditures,
Yeah.
that's what we could move into the grant if we needed to, or not leave that flexibility. But at the end of this fiscal year, we'll want to use the maximum flexibility to spend the budget we have, which could lead us into other conversations as well. And as Nathan had said, if we can defer ESSER, more of ESSER for another year, it just gives us more flexibility.
Okay, and my last question is, so on the surveys, I think it was like number 3 response was after school programming. And I know, I don't know about middle and high school, but at the elementary level, it doesn't seem like there's a whole lot going on after school, like the PEP programs and some of the programs that were being offered inside. Is that due to COVID still? I know that, I also know that it still seems like there's this childcare shortage to some extent with kids having to go to the YMCA or get bused over there. And so I guess I'm wondering if that, the survey basically said that the community wanted ESSER funds, or that was a priority, that they wanted ESSER funds too, and so I guess I'm just wondering if there's any way to sort of get those programs back into the schools or after-school programs, or, you know, late buses, or something that the ESSER funds could do to get these programs after school again, or more programs after school.
Yeah, I mean, that's a common goal, honestly. We have a stipend committee actually that meets. One of the things we did, we put out a form to all staff if they wanted to offer more, just wherever, after school activities. We had a lot of creative ideas that have come up, everything from Dungeons and Dragons to coding, et cetera. We haven't seen as much of an uptick at the elementary level, to be honest with you. So I mean, it is something, it's not a money issue, honestly, but it's certainly something.
You'll see, we did put 10,000 per school for extended day programming at the elementaries, because that's something we need to find those resources, and we know that need exists, and it came through in the surveys, but so we've allocated the funding. Now it's a matter of finding the people in the programming.
Liz asked a great question. If I can piggyback before we lose it. There are some exceptions, but just to make sure everybody's on the same page. Today's budget, I put it away. Financial report I'm just showing you. Today's budget, fiscal 22, that ends June 30th, really, practically speaking, can't be spent after June 30th. Obviously, if I have a purchase order and I have an encumbrance that's obligated fully to a contracted something with a vendor, you can encumber that and that can stick. But you certainly can't say, oh, I've got 20,000 left over, let me give it to somebody for tuition for next year, or pay somebody to come in September and work. Those are next year's costs. So I do every year, I will work to use your budget as we march to June 30th most effectively and fully. And so if these dollars don't need to be expended on June 30th, they'll kick. You know what I mean? And we'll save those until, okay, so I didn't put it on this form, but I put up a couple of slides, I built a couple of slides in case you got the opportunity, but remind you in all of that packet that I gave you last night, background stuff that had already been before the board. ESSER 2 has a deadline of September of 23, and ESSER 3 has a deadline of September 30th of 24. So it's not huge time into the future, but it certainly gives us.
Yeah, so I have a few questions. I'll try to start with some of the easier ones to tickle. So the categories, the buckets that we're actually able to throw money into from ESSER for the requirements, that's SEL, academics, and was it community engagement or something like that? What was the requirements to use ESSER?
Well, I mean, I think the litmus test that's most important is it must be related to COVID, and it must seek to prevent, prepare for, or respond to COVID-19. The learning loss as a set aside speaks to learning loss, and there have been some awesome guidance. There's been some guidance offered, but I think this room would make the same reasonable assumption or judgment that the state will, in terms of, is this really about learning loss? But beyond that, I don't remember there being anything specific about you need to do it with. They certainly played to, in some of the guidance, some of the suggestions, air handling and air quality was top of the heap, and mental health, student mental health has been a big one, and all of the aspects of learning loss.
Okay, and then I'm just wondering on the 2,000 for the learning loss current spending, it's 200,000 between the learning loss current spending and the staff wellness, student wellness activities. Will we hear from either those departments, or Steve, will you be bringing forth their ideas to like what's more specific uses they're thinking for this money? Or are we just kind of throwing money to these activities, not really understanding what the activities are going to be?
Yeah, well, so if you are in general agreement with this kind of approach, we would communicate both to the student wellness committee, I know one exists at the high school, as well as the broader wellness committee, which has a subset for staff, and say, we have funds. Create proposals, create ideas, and let's try to fund them to get them off the ground. We would certainly report to the board on whatever the.
And then we would be reporting that out in the town hall or some sort to the community.
Yeah.
Okay. And then I just had a couple questions around the community campus. So when are the leases up for the current, I know you said Families First is soon, but when are the leases up for the current organizations that are current tenants there?
So my understanding is that the language, and I haven't had it, but the language of the purchase and sale spoke to at least a 2-year commitment that the city would make to retaining existing tenants. And I don't know, that's just been conversation around the table where they were quoting passages from that, lines from that PNS. I don't know that there's any provision beyond that.
We did hear it was a priority of the foundation and interest in selling to the city, that the city would honor the current tenants, because that keeps the mission.
But there's only the 2-year commitment, so there's no guarantee that if we partner with them, current tenants that are out there, that would be a sustainable partnership. Right now, I mean, is that just something that we know or we don't know right now?
There is no plan to, that I'm aware of, to separate from any current tenants who aren't willingly on their own moving out.
Okay. And then regarding the 20%, is that only building ownership or would there be any land space that we would get in that? And when I say land space, I don't mean that goes through the city that we have to, abide time for if we turned it into a field or something. I mean, that we actually had and controlled the land space.
Yeah, so the most tangible, honestly, would be there's a sizable greenhouse there, as well as space around it. And you may know this academy has a lot of outdoor presence where they are. Bees, so yes, so there we already have talked about space outside that we would want to secure for that purpose, as well as use of the extensive land, the trails, etc., that are out there that we may not own per se, but that we have access to. And the last point I made, one of the things that Courtney talked about, some potential, sustainability or agriculture or whatever kind of connection to the program. It's not formed at all yet, but one of the things we would wonder is, does community campus open up an opportunity for a CTE connected program if indeed it's a better facility for a sustainability CTE program or whatever it might be.
Okay. And just a couple more quick questions. So I know that the high school is always looking for field space. There's that's probably not in the future for the space that I'm somewhat familiar with the land space around it, but would that be a potential use of that space or probably not the most effective use?
I don't
of that
think
space?
we would have fields that are completely dedicated to the schools over there,
Okay.
but use again, hopefully of other.
Other opportunities. Okay, and then, okay. I'm just curious about, since we don't know what the back end costs, I mean, you brought up like chasing back end costs at the elementary school. If we don't know the back end costs for the retro bit of moving Lister over in the other space, if we haven't been able to get those numbers, how can we mitigate our risk for chasing that back end cost?
So we've started, and Nathan maybe could speak to it, or he's involved in some conversations as well as I have with Peter Rice, Joel Nader, these are the facilities folks in the city, and they've brought in an architect from the city side to look at the space inside. We gave them a tour of Sherburne last week so they could see the space that's currently operating the program, and they're working right now to develop that proposal. So we would be able to have that.
Is there managing, would they be picking up the cost of the
So,
retro?
yeah, and honestly, I think we're gonna have a good relationship with the city through this that would give us, just as we had here in City Hall with renovations we never actually had to pay for. I think there's gonna be a lot of opportunity.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, Carrie.
The most important to me is how the Lister team is feeling about this, and I just want you to comment on that. Like, is this exciting, scary, all of the above? Like, are they happy with this? Do they feel like it'll meet their needs?
I'll tell you, Carrie, at first it was not. At first it was, we are so ingrained here that we couldn't think of leaving this building. And as you know, that building is such a unique old elementary feel, a lot of character, etc. Save for the windows that don't quite open in HVAC and the boiler that breaks every other week. But it's really, other than that, real charming. But what has really happened, which has really been amazing with the staff, and we were just over there yesterday, Sally and I talking with them, is they're really looking at what new opportunities they can create. And so a lot of excitement about partnering with Seacoast Community School, for example. They said, we have kids who do so, they don't do great with adults, but they do so great with young kids. Think about the opportunities there, Krempel Center, et cetera. There's a lot, as well as rec being housed over there, which is likely a component. There's going to be a lot of that kind of opportunity. I think they're starting to think programmatically what could be a little different about that. And so I would say right now the excitement is there.
Nathan, I have a question about the tents.
Yes.
Would it not make more sense to
I had
either
10.
to purchase a tent, or
Hindsight.
wouldn't it be great to have our architecture class, similar to the planters of town, design, you know, weatherproofing outdoor spaces that could be taken down that we could use at our schools to reduce this.
I think if you had all the foresight to know how often, or how many months, and how many tents, and what you would do, you might be able to construct something and we could explore that. I'll be straight up and tell you, we did look at buying tents, seriously. I mean, we were, but the expertise and the liability, because these are not, I don't know, I mean, you guys have all, you had to have seen the tents or go under the tents. I mean, these are big top tents. These were by and large, and the first time, you know, you saw a student climb up the tent and slide down the tent because of some of the water out of the field at one of the schools that my name was, there was great risk and worry there. And so even though we might have been able to secure ownership of multiple units, Mr. Lynch and I had the conversation, get back and forth, and reached out to Primex, talked about the possible liability, and said, well, that's not a business we want to be in. And so I don't know that I would advocate for building tents or owning tents, but there certainly could be other structures that I think, especially as we start to contemplate, oh, we're going to do this again and again, because at each turn of the world it was, okay, just get the tent, we need it for 2 more months, and we're good. And then this keeps going, and so yeah, there's definitely some.
Yeah,
some
it
potential
just
there.
seems that one of the opportunities that came out of COVID was starting to use outdoor space, right? It's been an age-old discussion, get kids outside. And so if we are committed to that as one of our board goals of wellness, I think we need to be thinking long-term of what does that outdoor space look like? Maybe it's a sailcloth that retracts or something, but a safe space that either the scaffolding could stay during winter or whatnot, but I'd love to explore that, because I would hate to see us say COVID's over, so outdoor space is over, back to inside, right? I think of let's capitalize on the opportunities and lean heavily into the strengths that we have.
So can I just add to that? Because I mean, I even think about the space that comes off the back of the high school cafeteria. It's really kind of dead, empty space right now, but like, I don't know, courtyard might not be the right word, or you know, large awnings with patio or something, but I think about the problems we've had, even now, that's plaguing our kids at the high school right now, around multiple lunch schedules and just opening up more outdoor space for, you know, lunches, and for, I know a lot of classes do go out and use that space or in front of the anchor, thank you, the anchor out front, but they can't always sit. And so I have seen some other districts come up with creative desk units that can be converted into lunch tables, or that can be, you know, rolled around, and I'm just thinking like, wow, okay, that's a simple CET project right there. So I don't know, like, if those are conversations that's being had, or that's a question for Kenny around numbers or something like that, but even looking at something that's more sustainable than just a temporary fix, I think could really be utilized at the high school.
Brian.
Yeah, just going back to this, because I know we're kind of like talking about spending all this, but you know, is there any risk in some of the learning loss ones not getting approved? Because I know like social worker seems reasonable, but an outdoor, we were talking about outdoor education. Is there risk? You know, I know we have to go out for approval, and same with the building for that matter. It's $2 million. You know, we're not going to know until we apply for it, right?
and I can do a better job of reaching out to targeted colleagues. I haven't spent a lot of time talking to smaller districts who have smaller dollars. And so spent their dollars on this, and they were done. Manchester is, last I knew, putting air handling into, they have 26 million, 56 million, some full, it's a crazy number by comparison. I mean, 4 million is a lot of money, but theirs was enormous. And they're doing major construction in all of their elementary schools. What I haven't found is someone else like us at Dover might be a good phone call that I could make and say, are you doing something other than just major construction? Because what I keep waiting for is to hear people tell the sob story of, we didn't get this, they rejected this, they said no to that. I haven't heard a lot of that, but honestly, most of the time I have a conversation, nobody's submitting because everybody's doing what we're doing, which is waiting to see, is more money coming? Is there another shoe going to drop? Do I need $1 million of whatever because something big happened? And yet what I will also say is the state just opened up and they're sending us PPE again. Don't, free access to some of the supplies. And so the worst that might come seems to not be as bad as it might have been expected to when there's other opportunities. But I'll see if I can chase down some, because I wonder about outdoor education, and I wonder about, we had a conversation about special ed program, and I struck it because it's federally mandated. There's no way that they would say, yes, you can use that. You have to do that. Like, that's not COVID related. You have to do special ed anyway. So I think it would be a real stretch to prove that this special ed related expense was only due to COVID. It wasn't an underlying, federal reality. So I'll see if I can come up. They certainly were, but I haven't heard anybody tell the story of how they've successfully gotten that argument made. But I also haven't had a whole lot of feedback of objections. So I'll see if I can dig further on some more appropriately targeted districts to see what their stories are, and then I can share that.
There are a lot of criteria in the application system that sort of make you provide your rationale for each one of these and performance indicators and outcomes and things like that. So it's not like we just give them the itemized list. Each one of these needs its own justification.
Nancy, last question on the answer before we move on. Oh,
Really
give you a
sorry.
minute.
That's me. That's some stuff
Hold on.
I would like to ask about, there was some conversation last night about surveying the public to see how they feel about spending $2 million on the community campus for Lister Academy. And Nathan, you did a great job with the survey that you did for parents about, how to spend the funds. I was wondering if we could do that for this project, just to get the feedback from the community. Do you think the school board should spend $2 million on the community campus for Lister Academy? Do people think that's a reasonable request? Just to
I would love Nancy to have the opportunity to have a conversation with the public to inform them on the process and the thoughts around how we got here and why we're here. And then once they're more educated on the project, I think that's a great idea to put out to get their feedback. But I really do feel like it would be helpful to have some informational conversations first.
So to have like a special meeting where we invite the public to come and look at these plans and then comment on it. Is something like that?
Yeah.
Do people agree that that's a good idea?
Yeah, I think that's great.
Okay, we'll work on that.
Do you have time to do that though? Because I know that this transaction is happening in the next couple of weeks or something. I guess I'm just wondering if there's some sort of time constraints for us committing these funds or committing to this, or have we already sort of committed to it and this is where we're at?
So we have time. We don't have an answer back from the DOE in the first instance, whether it's allowable. So I think the idea is good. We could message this, and maybe it's a newsletter thing or whatever. We could message this draft or some draft of it, and then open up a town hall informational piece to discuss and explain. And then if need be, get a pulse of.
Do it quickly.
Yeah, Lisa.
I think a town hall would be a great idea, and I think if we frame it too by sharing out with people what some of the results were from the surveys that we sent around again, just we could say we heard what people were saying. here's where it played out, come here and hear more about what we're thinking and share your feedback, just to remind people that we did get feedback to get here.
The feedback on the town halls from August was super positive. I think if we responded well, we were able to make Zoom and live work. So,
I think
those
putting it
are a
out,
good stopping point for the ESSER.
putting it out in the newsletter, I think is great, like if it can catch people's attention. Forgive me, but this social worker position, is that, we've had so many different requests for social work. What exactly is this one for? Is it the middle school or is it K through 12 or what? Can you just give a little more information about this?
Yeah, so, I mean, what we envisioned with was to be actually more of a case manager for some of our most intensive, high need communities. Which in the best instance might have children at elementary, middle, and high school. So we were though contemplating it to be housed at the middle school. But that's generally the sense of it. And again, it's a starting point. We may find that we go further.
Steve, in our communications during COVID, did we find that we need to do more work or put money towards our non-English speaking families? I know in speaking with the housing department around some of our focus groups and stuff, you know, they made a point of saying that sometimes it's not even just having the translation, it's being able to break down. It's great that we can give them access to Zoom and other things, but if we don't have training or explanation about how our systems work and what this, you know, program is and how it plays into their life. So I'm just wondering, like, do we need to be putting funding in any way for those families as well?
Possibly, and we haven't heard a lot of that, hope,
Okay.
but I think that is always something that we need to be attentive to because we may, you know, obviously if language is a barrier, we're not hearing from those folks.
Right, exactly. So I don't know, I'm not an expert on that. I just didn't know if we need to take a pulse on it while we have the conversation.
Our ESL teachers do a really good job of that, doing that outreach,
Okay.
but that is, but it's not a comprehensive look. It's like, I have a middle school student, I'm gonna help this
Right.
family, so I see what you're saying, that like, there was someone, if there was a need to manage that in a more systemic way.
I will say, I did get some feedback from Don Darrow and met with you today. And, you know, but as part of sort of meeting the other elementary school teachers that I haven't met with yet. But Don Darrow seems to be one of the hubs for a lot of ESL students. Not just because of the low income communities, but there's sort of a corridor of apartments and families coming from out of the country. I know there's some Afghan families that have settled in the area that may be attending as well. And so the need that I understood was that, you know, we only have one guidance counselor right now at Don Darrow, where every other school has two. I know Bree's taking on some stuff that she's I guess certified. And so I guess I wondered, you know, to Hope's point, I think there is a need there, especially at Don Darrow right now. And sort of maybe we can have some conversations about how to address that. And I guess that's why I was wondering about asking funds towards something like that too. But it sounds to me that social work, it would be the same sort of category of, you know, guidance right now. And so, you know, if you can't find somebody, you can't find somebody. So I don't know if there could be like a lower category or what our expectations are for a social worker, if there's level or training required. I mean, can we get somebody in the door and train them more here? I mean, is there ever, I could sort of want to expand on that if we could at some point.
Yeah, great, we can put that down as a future.
All right, great.
Let's move on to new business.
Before you leave budget.
Oh.
Hand that out, will you? There was a request
I
made.
was feeling good about it.
Sorry, we don't have to discuss it.
It's a
There
good
was a request
transition.
made about the potential, the estimated costs related to positions that were not in the budget.
Oh.
And I just wanted to make sure you had that.
So the total position. So just to clarify,
Yep.
these are possible positions you haven't included in the budget but have been wish lists.
And they-
And what the cost is.
Right, and they were specifically called out in the slideshow that we used to present the budget back on the 11th, I guess.
Yes.
So I went back and pulled those costs, just so that you have that in your folder.
Super helpful.
And-
Thank you.
And so if some of these
Can we
things,
use our hands? Oh. Thank you.
if some of these things pass through, would we be able to add some of these things into the budget? If some of the ESSER, ESSER funds pass through and some of these other positions, would we be able to allocate other dollars of picking up some of these positions?
Yeah, I mean, we haven't yet discussed, and the city council is discussing right now some potential guidance, I hope, but we haven't discussed what that increase is really that we're gonna end up on. Add up to that local policy.
I'm gonna move us on to new business. Is it new business?
No,
Oh,
it's on this.
Oh,
Okay.
so sorry.
Go ahead, Gary.
I think I would just, once we get that guidance from city council, I'd like to have this conversation sooner rather than later. Because I think that it's possible all of these could fit in the budget and I'd like to function and move forward from there. So just a request of, once we get some general guidance.
And that would be something too that we can inform Nathan back with people to come to our workshops to give us a little education background to help us understand. And
I'm wondering in terms of the city council, if they're aware of the ESSER funds, that they have to be saying, well, you really don't need to have this budget that you're requesting because you have the ESSER funds.
We'll definitely be communicating that when we get to the city council, what we did do.
are we ready to move on to new business? Okay.
All right, well, the good news is there is no new business.
Does anybody have any committee updates to share with the group? I did see, I don't know, this is as far as follow-up items, I did see that we all received an email today about the Black Heritage Trail and workshops that they're offering over Black History Month. And they sounded fantastic. They don't have them pulled up, but I feel like we should put those out in our newsletters. We should post them on the school department website. You do need to sign up if you're gonna go in person, let me know that's local commons. I'm sorry, I don't have the accurate data, but
I
let's
have
just.
that pulled up right here. It's a 6-week series. It begins on Sunday, February 6th and continues through March the 13th. And there's a link provided, so I can send that to you, Steve, if you want. And
Really interesting. And other than the future agenda items we named tonight, are there any others that people wanted to name? Lisa?
Yeah, and I can email you, but the city council last night, as I mentioned, just passed a policy around not having public meetings on certain religious holidays, and they're also going to outreach to the community to see what people in the community think is most important religious holidays. Kelly Barnaby sent me the exact language of their resolution. I'd love to send it for consideration for a future discussion here. If we can copy what they're doing, if people are going to consider that.
And is that just city council meetings or is that also like community meetings? I didn't watch the meeting.
This appears specific to the city council, and is looking at expanding immediately to include Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, and then to solicit suggestions from the community about what other religious holidays might be, worth avoiding in terms of scheduling. So it's separate from the school district calendar. It's about
Right, okay, just make sure. Other future agenda items that folks want to have to explore further.
do we still have school safety on?
Next, February 1st, February 8th, school safety and all of the elementary. Okay, that's. That's what I said. See, working on it. If anybody else have any upcoming events, things or anything that we should be aware of that's happening at the high school?
Well, I was gonna say tomorrow we do have another equity council meeting on Zoom. At the high school, well, tomorrow is our first day of our second semester, so that's super exciting. Where halftime show was today. You missed it. I really truthfully can't think of anything right now. now. I've been so preoccupied thinking about tomorrow and getting all new students. Yeah.
We need to make sure we get the Granite Sea Challenge stuff out too.
Yeah, I think they don't want us to spread it around too much over social media.
That's what
but-
the champion, or,
We're happy about, within the district, I think we're good to talk about it, so.
Can we, we'll talk about what the extent of it.
I don't know.
I'm a big fan.
I know.
You get the fire truck.
We've not seen Granite State Challenge.
Oh, yeah. We'll see. Do that again.
Any other events we need to announce? Then I will take a motion to adjourn.
Hello, can I say something?
Oh, yes,
sorry, Nancy. I just want to thank Margot for being our chair tonight. She did an awesome job. I think we should give her a round of applause. Thank you, Margot.
Thank you, Nancy, thank you. On that note, do I have a motion to adjourn? Yeah, second, Carrie. Great, have a nice evening.
They're trying to just do it.
Yeah.